Works. Okay, we're live on YouTube apparently. We have Omar Tobijah here today, and we will be discussing Haile Selassie's disposition concerning psychotropic substances. We tried to get it on Omar's channel. We tried to get it working on Omar's channel, but I guess
We tried to get it.
I guess they changed the settings on us.
Yeah, I messed that one up, but
That's all right.
we're still going to figure it out. I mean, challenges meant to be overcome, not ran away from. So one avenue don't work, we go another way. So it's up. So I mean, in regards to His Majesty's position on psychotropic substances, you advocate that these substances should be legalized, and I'm in disagreement with that. So, why is it that you feel like His Majesty legalized these substances?
Right. So let me see if I present my screen. Share screen. Maybe if I can share. Okay, share entire screen. Now let me pull up the. Can you see this right now on your screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so this is the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs of 1961. So just to give people a little background on the situation here, Haile Selassie implemented the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs of 1961 in his 1964 pharmacy regulations, Article 72. And in this convention that Ethiopia signed in 1965, it lists a couple schedules of narcotics in here at the end. And these include, I believe, cannabis, opium, cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl, right? Like those types of drugs. Here's fentanyl.
Right.
And then in 1971, the Convention on Psychotropic Substances was not signed by Haile Selassie. To my knowledge, the research we're doing on Ethiopia is still ongoing. But to my knowledge, thus far, there is no provision that that Ethiopia signed this treaty before. What was it, 1988 or something?
So they signed it in 1980, but the question is, with His Majesty not signing a treaty, does that mean that he disagrees with it?
It's a really good question. When I first discovered this provision here, when I first discovered the 1971 Psychotropic Substances Convention, I was kind of put back because, like, when and by the way, I failed chemistry in high school, so I have no idea. Like, when I first found this stuff, I had no idea what any of this was. Like, I've heard of DMT, like guys like Joe Rogan have made that popular, like LSD, MDMA. Like, I've heard of this stuff, mescaline, peyote, and all these different substances, PCP. Like, I've heard of this stuff, but I have I couldn't tell you the difference between like crystal meth and table salt if you put it in front of me, right? So when I
Well,
first
me neither. I mean, I don't deal with these drugs either. But we're just, regardless of the chemical makeup of these substances, the issue of legality, because this is an issue of legality as far as, are these substances legal if His Majesty didn't sign it. Now the thing is that the answer to that question actually is no. That because His Majesty did not sign a treaty does not necessarily mean that he disagree with it. Let me get you the specific language on it.
Yeah, pull that up. But I will tell you. So before, when I realized that things like LSD, magic mushrooms, which is psilocybin, when I realized things like LSD and ecstasy, and what's the other one, crystal meth. Like when I realized these things were not criminalized by Haile Selassie, I obviously had questions, But at first, I thought, there's got to be there's got to be some reason for this, And when I discovered the teachings of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi being taught in Haile Selassie's university, I actually, had the literature to now say Haile Selassie considered, people with weak personalities to be using hallucinogenics, whether they're legal or not. He recommended that people learn transcendental meditation to kind of, have discipline of the mind and not engage in any kind of drug abuse, right? So once I found that, I was like, okay, well, at least now we have justification to say that Haile Selassie did not condone or tell anyone, he didn't encourage anyone to use psychotropic substances, even if they were technically legal, right? But I at the same time, I didn't know why. So my speculation at first was maybe there's like a relation with khat, and maybe khat was legal. And then I thought maybe it's, compassion for the user, right? Because he already criminalized cannabis and heroin, but I started looking into it, and khat actually. So remember, I don't know if you remember, you told me that khat is actually still legal in Ethiopia right now, and even though they signed the treaty.
We're moving forward. You're moving forward with your presentation, and I respect that. However, there's a lot of things within the things that you're talking about that I want to discuss with you.
Right. I just wanted to make a correction, Omar. I just wanted to make a correction because I said that one of the substances in this convention, cathinone, I said that was probably not criminalized because it's khat. But when I did more research on this, it turns out that it is actually a derivative of khat. So khat is actually, the plant is actually not regulated by international law, which is why it's still legal in Ethiopia. Cathinone is a different. So these substances in the psychotropic substances, I thought it included khat. It only includes synthetic derivatives, like synthetic chemicals that people can make in a laboratory. Like that's what the psychotropic substances is. So like my initial hypothesis about why these substances could be illegal, because like khat was in here, is wrong, because cathinone is not actually referring to khat. It's actually referring to just one narcotic alkaloid within the khat plant. Does that make sense?
So you're saying that khat is not included within psychotropic substances because there's information that I have which says that it is.
Okay, so the information that I read, I mean, you could share that too, but the information that I read says that, and I can pull that up too. I was going to share it with you, but the library, the book that I went to go scan, they misplaced the book, so I have to wait like at least a week for them to find it. But in the one research paper, I can pull it up. It says that khat is actually unregulated, I believe, still. But cathinone, which is a derivative, is used in a substance called bath salts. I don't know. I don't even know. I think people smoke that. I really don't even know what that is, but apparently bath salts is what cathinone, and the other one is called cathine. Cathine, which is Schedule 3, and cathinone is Schedule 1. So, do you have information that says that khat is included in the psychotropic substances scheduling?
Well, like I was mentioning, I wanna deal with this like one step at a time. Now, as far as khat being included within the psychotropic substances, I want to talk about that, right? But I think we need to go back a little bit to the issue of legality and whether or not His Majesty signing this 1971 convention means that he opposed it or not. I think that's significant.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, under the law, under international law, the fact that he didn't sign this 1971 convention does not mean that he opposed to it. It says many countries indicated that they wish to consult with their capitals before signing. Now, there's a lot within the psychotropic substances convention that these countries are required to do and enforce. And the fact that His Majesty may have had some kind of reason to deliberate and discuss this does not necessarily mean that he made these substances legal. And I think that that's the point. That's the point that I want to talk about, because whether it's cot or crystal meth, whether or not whatever one of these drugs, narcotics, poisons that we're talking about, according to the pharmacy regulations and the penal code, it's all illegal. All harmful substances, according to His Majesty's law, are illegal in Ethiopia. So that's what that's the point that I'm getting at, you know. And let me look at this. Let me look at this document, right? So as far as if cot is included, as far as if cot is included, so there's a document by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime called Global Synthetic Drugs Assessment, and in this document, let me. How do I share my screen?
Oh, if you click share, I have to allow it somehow. Hang on. Click present and then click share screen, and then I think I should get I think it'll give me like a notification. I think. Oh, and then when that box opens up, you got to click on the actual the actual display. Like there'll be a box that says like choose what to share, and then just click entire screen and then click on that like visual box. Like it's kind of hard. Okay, screen sharing. Oh, I think we lost Omar. Hang on. I think we lost him. He might he should just rejoin. He has the link. If he comes back, I'll let him in. Let me see. Let me see if I can pull up this document myself that talks about cot not being. See, in the 1960s, independence, integration of the former Italian Ethiopian colonial territories allowed for cot chewing habit to flow southward unencumbered. See if he can click the link. Let me see if he's back. Let me tell him your signal dropped real quick. Ask him to join back in. See if he comes back in. I really don't want to move forward because he kind of wants to discuss these things before we move on, understandably so. I kind of want to correct myself, because when I said that the psychotropic substances included khat, I was actually wrong. I think I was wrong. So Omar's calling me right now. Let me ask him what he's up to. Hey, can you hear me, Omar? Hello? Let me see if I can call him back.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice.
See if he can join back in the live. I don't really want to move forward because the discussion is supposed to be with him about advocates of prohibition, at least those in Ethiopia and perhaps elsewhere in the Horn, insist that the United Nations has established that khat is a narcotic drug. This is stretching the facts. International organizations began to address the problems associated with khat as early as 1933, when the League of Nations Advisory Committee on the Traffic of Dangerous Drugs discussed 2 technical reports on the subject of khat. In 1957, the United Nations Commission on Narcotic Drugs was asked to take up the question and make recommendations on whether khat should be internationally classified as an illegal drug. Let me see if Omar's back online. Oh, here's Omar. Omar, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you, man. So
okay.
I was trying to
You're trying to share your screen.
Share my screen, and it dropped. I guess I must have messed that one up.
Yeah. So hang on. Click present, and then there should be a button that says share screen, and then you got to click on, like, it's because the button share is like grayed out. You got to click on that little window that's showing your screen, and then you click share. Okay, this is all right. I see your screen now.
You see my screen?
Yeah, and the 2 of us are still on the screen. So if you want to zoom in, or
all right. So this document, is from the UN, and we was talking about whether or not khat is actually included within that 1971 convention or not.
Right.
I think the law itself, according to my understanding of His Majesty's law, when you look at the language of the law, it covers the fact that these dangerous substances are restricted. So according to this document by the UN, I'm not sure if it's as clear as I want it to be.
Yeah.
But it says a recent feature of global drug markets is the unprecedented pace at which new psychoactive substances have been developed and at which these have emerged worldwide. By 2013, the emergence of 348 new psychoactive substances had been reported by the UN Office of Drug. What is it? Something about
drug committee. Yeah, the drug, like something like drug committee.
Right, globally. So there's the point that I was trying to make, whether or not it is khat or not, is that according to the law. Now, how do I exit out of my?
I think I can just turn it off. Yeah, if I remove it, I can just remove it like that. Okay.
All right. So the point is, right, according to His Majesty's penal law and his pharmacy regulations, based off of how I'm reading it, whether or not it's cot or any other um, dangerous substance. And when it comes to transcendental meditation, the direction that His Majesty is leading the people, in my opinion, is away from all of these substances. Whether it's like it says a new substance that has just been produced, because it says that these substances currently 234 psychoactive substances, excluding esters and isomers, are under the governance of the 1961 Senior Convention on Narcotic Drugs and the 1971 Convention. And yet the variety of substances available on the illicit drug market is higher than ever. So it's saying, there's 348 new substances that are not governed underneath the 1961 Convention or the 1971. See what I'm saying? So in order to guard against all of these substances,
Right.
there has to be a certain understanding of His Majesty's position when it comes to drugs, narcotics, poisons, toxins, because that's how it's written within the law. The law is written actually rather broadly, right? It's written broadly, and again, because His Majesty did not sign the 1971 convention, is a matter of interpretation. So just like when we talk about a positive interpretation, right? Acts should be interpreted in favor of effectiveness. What in your opinion is going to be effective when it comes to legalizing these substances, whether it is, again, new substances that are not included under any one of these conventions but have harmful effects, or whether it's a matter of if cot is included or not. You see what I'm saying? Like, especially with the fact that this, when it comes to us talking about the Order of Primus St. Croix and what His Majesty stood for and what Kieta stood for, and that whole lineage that we are supposed to be upholding and following, what is going to be our advice as a religious body to people when it comes to talking about meditation and the fact that you're considered to be deficient? You're considered to be deficient if you are taking any of these substances.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand the gravity of the research, and I definitely understand the concerns. I mean, I was shocked when I came across the information, but my understanding has developed since I've even made the video, and I initially thought that maybe His Majesty legalized the stuff because of cot. Maybe it was because he has compassion for the user. But when I started researching more, let me see if I can share my screen just so I can kind of explain like where my understanding has gone now, because I've been researching it since you commented on these things on Facebook, which got me thinking, because obviously crystal meth is dangerous. Like it will ruin your life, right? And if we're telling people that it's legal, like there's consequences to that, right? So let me just share real quick. Let me just share this little document. That way we can discuss it. If I go to, which one was it? I think it was this one. Okay, so it says, advocates of prohibition, at least those in Ethiopia and perhaps elsewhere in the Horn, insist that the United Nations has established that khat is a narcotic drug, and this comes from the Addis Reporter 2004, Letters from Anti-Khat Groups to Me 2004. This is stretching the facts. The international organizations began to address the problems associated with khat as early as 1933, when the League of Nations Advisory Committee on the Traffic of Dangerous Drugs discussed 2 technical reports on the subject of khat. In 1957, the United Nations Commission on Narcotic Drugs was asked to take up the question and make recommendations on whether khat should be internationally classified as an illegal drug. The investigations in both cases failed to establish clear evidence of the harmful effects of khat consumption. A study commissioned by the United Nations produced a report in 1975 that determined cathinone to be the active ingredient that gives fresh khat its potency. Previously, cathine, which is basically ephedrine, was believed to be the main active ingredient. Cathinone is many times more powerful, similar to amphetamine in its makeup, but half as potent. In 1986, the United Nations finally added cathinone, but not the khat plant, to its list of substances that should be regulated. In fact, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime is quite explicit that the khat plant is a stimulant not subject to international control, unquote, UNODC 1996. In 2006, the World Health Organization Expert Committee concluded that the potential for abuse and dependence was low, and that the level of abuse and threat to public health was not significant enough to warrant international control. Therefore, the committee did not recommend the scheduling of khat, and that comes from the World Health Organization Expert Committee on Drug Dependence, 2006, pages 11 to 12. 70 years after the international community first took up the issue of khat, there is still not a clear-cut answer, but it is clear that khat is not under international control. So that's just to show that my initial hypothesis about maybe His Majesty was looking at the psychotropic substances like cathinone, maybe this was because of khat, I think is incorrect. I think that the reason these substances were never criminalized is actually a different reason completely. Again, this is the thesis that I'm working on right now. I know that you had mentioned that all chemicals and poisonous substances were criminalized in Ethiopia, but the way that I'm looking at it would be the 1964 pharmacy regulations. I'm looking at the definitions of a drug. So a drug shall mean any substance, including all narcotics, used as a medicine or in making medicines, and shall include without limitation all medicines and preparations recognized in the International Pharmacopoeia for internal or external use, and all other medicines and preparations recognized by law for such use within Ethiopia. And then I'm also looking at the definition of a narcotic, which is a narcotic shall mean any drug classified as a narcotic under such international narcotics conventions as are binding on Ethiopia and included in the current revised list of narcotic drugs under international control as issued by the Permanent Central Opium Board, sometimes also referred to as the International Narcotics Control Board.
Will you define drug and narcotic, right? So you also have to understand that language is not just confined to the list of narcotic drugs under international control, because it is specifying that there are additional lists. It says all other medicines and preparations recognized by law, which means that His Majesty has provisions within his law for these drugs to be updated according to the current laws of Ethiopia, right? So His Majesty also said in order to be of use in the future, the consolidated laws must be kept up to date. His Majesty said these things, in many different ways, that it has to be up to date, and he gave that power over to his ministers for it to be updated according to the current laws. So according to whether or not His Majesty signed the 1971 convention for khat or not, whatever the reason why he didn't sign it, first of all, doesn't mean that he objected to it. Because when you go to the United Nations website, it talks about objections that these countries have. So let me try to share the screen. I don't want this to go like we just sharing and sharing, but if it has to be that, then I guess that's
Yeah, no, share what you need to. I'm already sharing your screen. You don't have to press the button again.
okay. So
I've already got your screen shared, so just pull up whatever document.
all right. So this is the 1971, right, Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Convention, Vienna, 21st of February. All the countries which have been amended to this convention, Ethiopia in 1980. And it also lists on here reservations, right? Things that the country has a problem with that they can't necessarily agree to. And there's many different countries that have reservations, right? This convention shall not apply to the non-metropolitan territories for the international relations of which Australia is responsible. For whatever reason, they feel like, you know, this can't apply to it. They have made their concerns known, and it just goes on and on when it comes to countries who voiced whatever objections they have. There's no objection from Ethiopia. There's none, right? So the idea that His Majesty didn't sign it because he somehow had a had a problem with it, which then makes all of these substances legal. Whether the issue is caught doesn't really matter, and that's why I initially presented that document that talks about all of these new substances that are not included underneath the 1971 or the 1964 convention. And
Right.
I'm saying, like, when you read the law, there's no way that this can be that these substances are legal. So you mentioned the pharmacy regulation, and you mentioned the three dash 13 3-4, the definition of narcotic and drugs.
Right.
Let me share this one more time. Share my screen again. You got me up?
Yep.
All right. So this is a document, Substance Abuse and Legal Considerations in Ethiopia, written by some doctors in Ethiopia. The point of this whole document, which is a really good document, I can't read the whole thing, but it talks about pot, alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, which according to them are the main problems, main drug problems in Ethiopia. But there are others. The point of this is this right here: the control methods. Can you see what this says here?
Yeah, I think if I maximize my screen, I'll be able to read. Yeah, we can read it.
All right. So it says substance abuse control comprises control of supply, production, availability, crop eradication, provision of suitable alternative sources of income, crop substitution, control of access and distribution, demand reduction, reducing consumption, increase in prices, control of advertising and promotion, and increased individual resistance from social pressure through health education are among the possible control methods. Ethiopia is a party to the Single Convention on Narcotics of 1961 and the 1971 Convention on Psychotropic Substances. As per the stipulations of the conventions, the Ministry of Health Pharmacy Department is the central body to exercise all control actions to decrease the demand and supply of drugs and thereby limit the use of drugs to entirely scientific and medical purposes. This is the point right here. The principal laws under which psychotropic and narcotic drugs are controlled in Ethiopia are the Pharmacy Regulation of 1964 and the Penal Code of 1956. Why is that? That is what we need to talk about.
Can you pull it up just real quick? I wanted to read the last sentence there. It said something again about the. Let me just really quickly see.
The basis of drug control legislation is the Pharmacy Regulation of 1964,
right,
which controls the supply of pharmaceutical products at all stages, such as manufacture, registration, quality control, export, import, distribution, and store. Now,
right.
You know that the pharmacy regulations is that it restricts it, it regulates it to people with a permit, under government control and not legalized. That is what the pharmacy regulations stipulates, and we can go through all of them codes, right? Because in the pharmacy regulations, we can read Article 39. No pharmacy shall dispense or preparation containing any poison or any drug which may be specified in a list prepared from time to time by the Ministry of Public Health, which again means that this is now a living document. It says specified in a list prepared from time to time by the ministry. That means that it has to be updated. Whatever the current laws are, they apply. And it says, and it restricts it all throughout Article 13, 23, 35, 39. What about 52? The standards of quality in all medicinal preparations shall in the public interest be those of the latest edition of the International Pharmacopoeia or any other specified pharmacopoeia, or formularily insofar as such other pharmacopoeia or formularity has been approved for this purpose by the minister. So as far as drugs and narcotics are concerned, His Majesty's law is up to date with the current laws and the current times. And these are restrictions. These are restrictions on drugs, on narcotics. So again, whether or not it's a substance included within the 1961 Convention or the 1971 Convention, His Majesty's law states within the pharmacy regulations that nothing can be sold, distributed, produced, legalized without the permission of the Minister of Public Health. That provision for the Minister of Public Health to issue that license is there, which means that it's illegal.
So I wish it was that simple. Like I wish that was enough to say legally we can criminalize everything listed in the psychotropic substances. Like I wish the pharmacy, honestly, I wish that not only do the pharmacy regulations include like a provision as Article 72 does for the single convention. Like I wish there was just another part. I wish there was another article in there that just included the 71 psychotropic substances list. But there are drugs that are being added to the INCB and which is in accordance with. Let me just share my screen real quick. They are they are adding, this is the International Narcotics Control Board, they are adding new substances to the list, right? So the Commission on Narcotic Drugs added the following narcotic drugs to the 1961 convention, right? So in 2022, I mean, you see there's something called brorphine that probably didn't exist in 1961, you know? And then there's something called metonitazine. And these are the years that like, what is this, crotone fentanyl? Like there's just like the issue with these substances is that they haven't been synthesized yet, right? Like if you are a chemist and you understand how to make this substance, you know, they still have to research it and discover the effects of it and whether it should be coded as a narcotic drug and whether it should be scheduled as a harmful substance, right? So like these are the most recent ones that have been added to the 61 convention, but with the 71 convention, there's actually a bigger issue here that I think I missed. I initially missed the main reason I think now that Haile Selassie didn't sign the 71 convention. I think there's a bigger reason than just compassion for the individual, and cathinone isn't even, it's not even cot, because it's just a derivative of cot. So if you can see my screen, I just wanted to read 1 Corinthians 2:16. I know it's a Bible verse, but it just says, "For who hath known the mind of the Lord, that he may instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ." So this teaching actually comes directly from Primus St. Croix. He gives us the foundational teachings of the Bible. He gives us the theological formula that we use to interpret all the scriptures. And I say this to say that we don't try to pass off his ideas as our own, because the Bible says that people who do that are thieves and robbers. And Omar has outlined what a spiritual sin is in that sense. You know, honor your father and mother, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, right? In the spiritual sense. So this further demonstrates, this passage real quick just demonstrates that the mind of God is different than the mind of Christ. So how is Christ God if we have the mind of Christ? If we have the mind of Christ, does that mean we're all God? So again, Primus teaches that the mind of Christ and the mind of God are two different minds. So that's why we also say that Primus is the Messiah and Haile Selassie is God, because they're two different individuals. Now, the more I've researched this psychotropic substances convention, I've come to realize that the mind of God, and I think there's a quote by Haile Selassie that says something like, you know, the thoughts of God are not, the ways of God are not the ways of man, or something. Do you know which quote I'm talking about, Omar? There's a quote, something similar like that, right?
Right.
And I was reading this about cathinone, just to reiterate. It says synthetic cathinones are beta-keto phenethylamines, and chemically similar to amphetamine and methamphetamine. Cathinone, the principal active ingredient in the leaves of the cot plant, Catha edulis, can be considered as the prototype from which a range of synthetic cathinones have been developed. Internationally controlled substances in this group are cathinone, methcathinone, cathine, pyrovalerone. Cathinone and methicathinone are listed in Schedule 1 of the 1971 Single Convention on Psychotropic Substances, cathine in Schedule 3, and pyrovalerone in Schedule 4. Down here it says, typically synthetic cathinones have an amphetamine type analog, that is cathinone, ephedrone, and methylone, are structurally related to amphetamine, methamphetamine, and MDMA respectively, while little comprehensive pharmacological data is available for many of these synthetic cathinones. And then it goes on to say that synthetic cathinones are frequently found in products sold as research chemicals, plant food, bath salts, or glass cleaner, and are usually sold in powder, pill, or capsule form. Then there's a mephedrone and methylone are usually available as white or brown powders or in the form of pills that are often sold as ecstasy. Most synthetic derivatives are ingested but may be injected. Methadone is commonly nasally insufflated, ingested by swallowing a powder wrapped in paper, which is called bombing, or mixed in a drink. Now, what is interesting about these substances in the 1971 Psychotropic Substances Convention is that they can be synthesized, right? If you are a chemist and you know what ingredients go in here to make this, you can make this at home. So, like crystal meth, for instance, crystal meth, the ingredients to crystal meth apparently is just household items. And then if you do chemical processes to those ingredients and mix them in a certain way, you get crystal meth. And one of the documentaries was saying that even those household ingredients are now heavily regulated in the US, which has pushed out the demand for the manufacture of crystal meth into Mexico. And now you have the Mexican cartels profiting off of crystal meth. Now, this goes for all of these PCP, MDA. I've been researching a ton of different like clandestine chemists like Dr. Alexander Shulgin, Hamilton Morris, Rick Doblin, Stanislav Grof. He tried to treat homosexuals with LSD in the 80s. There's just a bunch of Terry Dalkayson, Steve Gill, and just a ton of chemists that have been able to make these substances. I think the hardest schedule though to justify, right, when it comes to Haile Selassie not signing this document, I think the hardest schedule is going to be Schedule 1, because these are the most potent and most harmful substances, right? When it comes to like LSD, right? LSD, MDMA, all of these are like psychedelics, right? These will make you like trip. Are you familiar with psychedelics, Omar? Like they make you, I don't want to say they make you go crazy, but they make you hallucinate, you know?
Well, the thing is that with all of these substances, as you're mentioning, that can be prepared, all of these substances are restricted underneath His Majesty's law. Because in the Pharmacy Regulations, Article 13, it says, no person shall establish, operate, or maintain a pharmacy or in any way sell or distribute to the public medicinal preparations.
Which article are you in?
13.
13?
Pharmacy Regulations, Article 13.
Okay, let's go to 13. Requirement of permit. Okay.
So no person shall establish, operate, or maintain a pharmacy or in any way prepare, sell, or distribute to the public medicinal preparations, narcotics, or poisons, or other dangerous drugs included in the list referred to in Article 39, which I read earlier. Hereof, except pursuant to a permit for the operation of a pharmacy issued under Article 14 hereof, provided, however, that nothing in this Article 13 shall be deemed to restrict such limited activity in respect to medical supplies as is authorized by any other license or permit issued under these regulations. So when you're talking about chemists who can make these products, make these dangerous substances, whatever the substance is, if it causes harm, a poison, right? That the word poison is listed within that Article 13. It says narcotics or poison. So when we define narcotics and drugs within the pharmacy regulations, we also have to keep in mind that His Majesty used additional terms. And I think that the reason why he made it broad, it's not a limited law. So you can't limit this law just to the list of narcotic drugs under international control, because there's more language involved to it. He doesn't just use the terms narcotics and drugs. He uses poisons, toxins, right? And he says that all of these things, all of these medical preparations are restricted, are illegal. And he says that all of these things, all of these medical preparations are restricted, are illegal. and you need a permit for it. You need permission for it. So there's no way that I can justify saying, based off of reading this, that His Majesty was giving people permission to make crystal meth in their house.
Right. I think I understand what you're saying. Article 39, if I could just jump to that, because I forgot what that was, just real quick. Article 39 said dispensing and storage of poisons and other dangerous drugs. No pharmacy shall dispense a preparation containing any poison or other dangerous drug, which may be specified in a list prepared from time to time by the ministry for this purpose and circulated to all pharmacies except according to a prescription or such regulations governing the sale of poisons or other dangerous drugs as may be issued by the minister. And then number 2 says the list referred to in paragraph 1 of this Article 39 may stipulate that certain poisons or other drugs therein named shall be stored in a locked cabinet. Now, when I would agree, before I read some more information on on these synthetic chemicals, like before I understood what these were. So these are so there's over 100. There's over like 100 substances in the Psychotropic Substances Convention, right? But there's actually only like 15 kinds of chemicals in there. So I say that to say that there's like 1,000. There's literally like thousands of chemicals that have not yet been invented or synthesized or found yet or discovered yet that might cause the same effect as like DMT or something else, right? But the reason why I believe that there might be a bigger purpose to legalizing these substances is because when we talk about criminalizing substances, right? When we talk about criminalizing these drugs, there are intended consequences to criminalization, but there are also unintended consequences to criminalization. And I think we've overlooked the prospect of unintended consequences when it comes to the psychotropic substances from 1971. I think what His Majesty's mind was thinking here is that the criminalization of these substances actually has unintended consequences that are more harmful than criminalization. And I can explain this if I go to an article written by attorney Mark J. Victor. He wrote this article, and this is actually what I'm going to base my thesis on when it comes to this topic. But he talks about a lot of things in this article. Many of them, like obviously, like he has two main arguments, right? One is like the freedom argument, and then the other argument is called the consequentialist argument. And certain key parts of that consequentialist argument is what I'm going to base my thesis on. But if I read this to you, just so you can get an understanding of who the guy is, like he's not just like some guy cooking meth or something that wants it to be legal. If you have a minute, I'll read this. It just says, legalize methamphetamine by attorney Mark J. Victor. I think he's running for like Senate in Arizona right now, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, he says, I'm the last guy who ought to argue for the legalization of meth. As a practicing criminal defense attorney, I make a good income from defending people who are charged with drug crimes. If the drug war ended, I would lose a substantial portion of my income. Additionally, some would call me a health nut. I go to the gym 6 times a week and eat organic foods as often as possible. I wouldn't change my healthy lifestyle if drugs were legal. I have 3 little kids. I don't want them ever to become drug addicts. I want them to grow up in a safe world. Indeed, that's exactly why I want the drug war to end. When I was in law school, a wise law professor of mine taught me that if you are asking the wrong question, the answer doesn't matter. In regards to meth, the question is not whether meth is dangerous and unhealthy. Over the years, I have represented countless meth users. I have seen the consequences of meth use up close. I am convinced meth use will likely ruin the user's life. It is an extraordinarily dangerous addictive drug. Few drugs are more addictive or dangerous than meth. Many of those who oppose the legalization of meth identify the horrors of meth use. I entirely agree with their assessment of meth's dangers. Asking whether meth is dangerous or unhealthy or addictive is not the right question. The relevant question is whether our society would be better served if meth was manufactured, distributed, bought, and sold legally. The answer is yes. There are two related but separate reasons why ending the drug war is critical. First, a free society requires that the drug war end. I refer to this argument as the freedom argument. Second, the consequences of ending the drug war would yield economic and other benefits which would greatly benefit our society. I refer to this argument as the consequentialist argument. Most readers will not be persuaded by the freedom argument. This fact is disturbing to me. In fact, many of the issues which plague our world will persist unless and until people come to respect the principles embodied in terms such as individual responsibility, self-ownership, and freedom. These concepts are what our country was founded upon and the very reason why America prospered. Now, they are given mere lip service if they are considered at all. If you shrug your shoulders and brush off the freedom argument, you should be ashamed of yourself, whether you realize it or not. You are the problem. So then it says the freedom argument. I'm a good dad. I don't want my kids using meth. Indeed, I will force my opinion about not using meth upon my kids. I will prevent them from using meth by force if necessary. As a dad, I have other policies as well. For example, my kids are not allowed to ride their motorized quads without helmets or to ride in the car without seatbelts. They are not allowed to smoke cigarettes or skydive either. However, at some point, my kids will be responsible to decide for themselves what activities are too dangerous for them. Both assessing the dangerousness of an activity and determining how much danger is acceptable will become the exclusive domain of each of my kids as it pertains to them. Resolving these questions for oneself is an important task and responsibility of any free person. The question of who gets to make decisions about the disposition of certain property is central to understanding freedom. Who gets to decide what activities are too dangerous for you? Should I get to decide what activities are too dangerous for you? What about your neighbor, or the majority, or the president, or Congress, or some judge? In a free society, the owner of the property gets to decide how property is used. Because you own your body, I assert that you should decide how your body is used or abused. In terms of the freedom argument, the question of legalization of meth poses exactly the same question as many other issues currently confounding our fellow citizens. The following non-exhaustive list contains questions that are each different versions of the same question about how a particular body is used. Should people be allowed to eat Big Macs? Should people be allowed to consume any unhealthy foods at all? Should people be allowed to play football despite the risk of serious injury? Should people be allowed to skydive or rock climb? Should people be allowed to ride in cars without seatbelts? Should unprotected sex between consenting adult strangers be allowed? Should consenting adults be allowed to have sex in exchange for money? Should adults be permitted to ingest marijuana for health reasons? Should adults be permitted to ingest marijuana for mere personal pleasure? Should competent adults be allowed to voluntarily end their lives if they choose? Each question begs the initial question about who gets to decide how a particular human body is used. Those of us who are pro-freedom would in each case conclude that the owner of the particular human body in question should decide how that body is used. The initial issue of who decides must be resolved first. Although I would try my best to persuade others not to use meth, I concede it is not my decision. Among adults, persuasion is fine, but coercion is not. I will not force others to live by my assessments of dangers. I respect the property of other people such that I respect their right to use their property in ways I vigorously disagree with. I have no claim on how others use their property unless and until their activities trespass upon my property. The freedom argument is much bigger than the question of whether meth should be legal. It certainly resolves the question, but it raises larger questions about the very nature of government. Any legitimate role of government is confined to protecting rights. Indeed, unless you disagree with the principles upon which this country was founded and believe the government is the source of rights that may be distributed or to us or taken away, you must agree that government can have no rights other than the ones we individually delegate to it. Because you have no right to be my daddy, you have no such right to delegate to the government. Further, because no person individually has any such right, even the majority of people added together collectively have no such right. Therefore, when the government acts as my daddy, it acts wrongfully, even if it acts pursuant to an accurately counted democratic vote. Although it is perfectly fine for me to act as a daddy to my kids, the government has no right to act as a daddy for us. Some people posit that legalized meth would send the wrong message to people about using meth. However, the government's role is not to send messages to us about what is right or wrong or good or bad. We don't need messages from the government. Free people determine for themselves how to run their lives. I have a right to be self-determined.
This is, I'm not trying to be rude, you know?
Right. I know we don't agree with what Mark Victor here is saying.
The question is this.
I have to get to the point though, Omar. I got to get to the big points that he makes about crystal meth though, because he actually makes some good points. All of these points so far, I'm just giving you what he where he's coming from, right? So he's not some guy that's
make your point, because what
okay.
he's saying just so far,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
not
see
relevant,
any correlation
right? It's not
with
relevant,
the laws
right?
that I have just cited from Haile Selassie, which
Right.
restricts poisonous toxins, drugs, narcotics.
Of course, of course, of
So
course.
him
So
talking about the government has no right to be my daddy does not correlate with Haile Selassie.
right, right. Of course,
So,
of course. I just
so
wanted to
make your
give you,
point.
yeah, yeah. I just wanted to read it in its entirety. So it's not like I'm taking, it's not like he's advocating for something that is, it's not that he's saying crystal meth is good. So let me give him the consequentialist argument, right? This is where the important part is. It says the consequentialist argument. Some people say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over while expecting different results. They are right. The government has been recklessly ramping up the war on drugs for the past 35 years. Every year, we get tougher laws and tougher sentences. Approximately 1.6 million people are needlessly arrested every year for nonviolent drug offenses. Many more nonviolent drug users are simply charged without arrest. Some of them are students who lose their student loans and can no longer afford college. Others are people who hold professional licenses and can no longer work in their professions. Lives are being needlessly ruined. The growth of the prison industry has mushroomed. We now have private companies in the prison business. This is no surprise when you consider that the United States claims 4.6% of the world's population, but 22.5% of the world's prison population. The DEA has grown from 2,775 employees in 1972 to almost 11,000 employees with 86 foreign offices in 62 countries in 2005. We have well over 2 million people in prison. Since 1980, America's general population has increased 20%, while America's prison population has increased at 20 times that rate, or an astonishing 400%. America imprisons more people as a percentage of our population than any other country in the world. This is a sad state of affairs for any country, especially one which refers to itself as the land of the free. Despite the explosive expansion of government to fight the war on drugs, drug use is more prevalent today than it was before the war on drugs started. Additionally, drugs are cheaper, more potent, and easier to get than they were in the early years of the drug war. Throwing more money into the issue has not resulted in fewer people using drugs. Even the federal government admits drug use has increased recently from 6% in 1993 to over 8% in 2003. Despite the frantically increasing efforts to curb the flow of drugs, high school students report drugs are still easy to obtain. Almost 90% of 12th graders report marijuana is very easy or fairly easy to get. Over 47% of 12th graders say cocaine is very easy or fairly easy to get. And more than 32% say heroin is very easy or fairly easy to get. I've had clients tell me they became addicted to drugs when they were in prison. Even in a prison setting, drugs are prevalent. Not only are drugs readily available, but some of them have also become more dangerous as a result of the drug war. Looking specifically at meth, the drug war has resulted in exacerbating the dangers associated with amphetamine use. While attempting to put the hysteria currently surrounding meth use in perspective, a columnist named Jack Schaefer, who writes for Slate, aptly stated the following. In the mid-1960s, just before the government declared war on amphetamines, the average user swallowed his pills, which were of medicinal purity and potency. Snorting and smoking stimulants were almost unheard of, and very few users injected intravenously. Today, 40 years later, snorting, smoking, and injecting methamphetamines of unpredictable potency and dubious purity has become the norm, with all the dreadful health consequences. If the current scene illustrates how the government is winning the war on drugs, I'd hate to see what losing looks like. And then he cites the article, and he continues. He says, the United States now spends over $50 billion every year to combat the war on drugs. The war on drugs has been a colossal and unparalleled failure. Despite my countless conversations with judges, prosecutors, police officers, DEA agents, and drug dealers, it is extraordinarily rare for me to find anyone who thinks the drug war is working or will ever work under any circumstances. Indeed, despite my countless invitations, I have yet to find anyone willing to debate me publicly on the drug war. Imagine a $50 billion annual program nobody seems willing to defend. I understand why nobody wants to debate me on this issue. I believe the people who work in the justice system and truly understand the problems associated with the drug war know they would be debating the wrong side of the issue. I recently argued the case for meth legalization before a group of judges and prosecutors. I was disappointed during question time when, despite my provoking and challenging them, there was only one half-hearted attempt to engage me on the issues. The case for legalization is overwhelming. I have had occasion to talk privately and confidentially with many drug dealers for well over a decade. I estimate I have represented hundreds of drug dealers, although some have simply been users who sell to support their habit. Others have been major players in big drug organizations. I have found many of them to be bright people who are well aware that an end to the drug war would immediately put an end to their businesses. They realized that they could not compete with large corporations in a legal market. Their ability to make money by manufacturing, distributing, and selling drugs exists solely because of the drug war. They very much want the war on drugs to continue and even expand. Many drug dealers understand that each large drug bust brings increased profits for them. Although a drug seizure is bad news for the particular drug dealer involved, it is wonderful news for all the drug dealers in the market. When you see government agents celebrating a large drug seizure, imagine all the other drug dealers celebrating along with them. The economics of drug sales are no different than any other product sold in the market. Every big drug seizure causes a temporary decrease in the supply of that drug in the relevant market. However, the drug seizure doesn't affect the demand for the drugs. Drug users still want drugs despite some drug dealers being arrested. When the demand remains constant and the supply is decreased, prices go up. Imagine being a drug dealer with a big supply of drugs on hand when prices suddenly go up. It would be accurate to say that drug dealers gain the most through increased profits when government agents make a seizure. Increased profits also serve to entice people to embark on new careers as drug dealers. Drug dealers love the drug war and do not want it to end. If you support the drug war, you are on the side of and act as an unpaid lobbyist for the plight of the drug dealer. Some of the drug dealers I have met are actually very nice, non-violent people. I have represented drug dealers who do not use drugs at all. They were simply unable or unwilling to refuse an illegal opportunity to make a lot of money. However, some of the drug dealers I have met are not nice people. They sell their drugs with the help of violent street gangs. Some of these gang members intentionally market drugs to kids. Because gang members generally cannot utilize the court system to settle disputes over drug sales, nor can they insure their merchandise against losses, violence and guns are necessarily involved. Simply causing meth to be manufactured illegally is by itself a huge problem. As a result of illegal meth labs, toxic chemicals used to produce methamphetamine are often discarded in rivers, fields, and forests. The environmental damage which occurs results in ever-expanding cleanup costs. The massive growth in costs to clean up such environmental messes is also illustrative of the failure of current policy. The DEA's annual cost for cleanup of clandestine meth laboratories in the United States has increased steadily from $2 million in 1995 to $23.8 million a mere 7 years later in 2002. A huge collection of well-documented facts about the failure of the current drug policy can be found at www.drugwarfacts.org. I have heard the saying that those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it. I suspect some criminal defense lawyer in the 1920s incurred wrath from the establishment for writing an article advocating for the legalization of alcohol. I would bet the nice attorney was attacked by small thinkers who repeatedly pointed out the harmful attributes of alcohol. In case you are unaware, the government decided in 1919 to amend the United States Constitution to grant power to Congress to prohibit the manufacture, sale, and distribution of alcohol. Their drug war played out just like ours, a complete and total disaster. However, it was the best thing that ever happened to organized crime. The manufacture, sale, and distribution of alcohol were conducted entirely in illegal and violent markets. Criminals prospered and criminal organizations grew. A major crime wave began in the 1920s and continually increased until the end of Prohibition in 1933, when it immediately started to reverse. Prohibition did nothing to curb the desire of people to use alcohol. Indeed, both the per capita consumption of alcohol as well as the rate of alcoholism increased during Prohibition. Illegal clandestine stills manufactured alcohol of inconsistent and unpredictable quality. Law enforcement was overwhelmed chasing after people involved in alcohol-related crimes. Does any of this seem familiar to you? In 1933, they figured it out and repealed the 18th Amendment. To be fair, we still have people with substantial alcohol abuse problems. It is a real problem. We have no shortage of alcohol-related crimes. However, violent criminal street gangs do not make money from the sale of alcohol. Although few people home brew alcoholic beverages, people do not brew alcoholic beverages in clandestine labs. Nobody is offered large cash rewards to transport alcohol. The Budweiser guy doesn't fight the Miller guy if they both happen to arrive at the store at the same time to deliver their drug. Alcohol companies settle disputes peacefully in court. Alcoholics can seek help without the fear of criminal prosecutions. More resources can be devoted to apprehending real thugs because our justice system is not overloaded with cases of people manufacturing, distributing, or selling alcohol. Isn't this obviously a better deal? We know certain things for sure. If meth was no longer illegal, number one, all dangerous clandestine meth labs in residential neighborhoods would close. 2, all dangerous street gangs would be out of the meth business. 3, every dime currently spent on meth prohibition could be spent on real crime. 4, meth addicts would have no legal disincentive to seek help. 5, the manufacture of meth would be safe and produce a consistent product. And 6, toxic waste from meth production would be safely disposed of. If you support maintaining the war on drugs, you must necessarily conclude that either I am wrong about the above 6 assertions, or that the benefits of the drug war outweigh the obvious benefits contained in the 6 assertions. It is difficult for me to imagine one could rationally and honestly dispute any of the 6 assertions. They are obvious and virtually guaranteed to flow from legalization. Therefore, a drug war supporter is left with the argument that the drug war's benefits outweigh the benefits contained in the 6 assertions. If this is your position, I challenge you to honestly reweigh the costs and benefits of each scenario. Unless you put your finger on the scale because you personally benefit from the drug war, you must conclude legalization wins. I do not intend to claim that the above 6 assertions are the only benefits of legalization. I list them together because I find them to be indisputable. There are other benefits of legalization. I suspect many people would either not experiment with or stop using meth. Recently, a teenage meth user confirmed for me that she and her friends started using meth, at least in part because it was illegal. I cannot recall any friends of mine who didn't drink alcohol prior to reaching age 21.
Oh, Petar.
Yeah.
We don't need to go through the whole article.
Okay, well, that was the point. The 6 points. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot within the article that has to be discussed. And again, I'm trying to figure out how this relates to His Majesty's laws. Now, based off of what this guy is saying,
Right.
based off of what he's saying, he's trying to make to basically sum it all up. He's trying to say that legalization, the benefits of legalization, and he gave his reasons for that, is better than criminalization. And I mean, some of the stuff he's saying, I guess makes sense. But as far as how it relates to His Majesty's law, and let me share something.
Okay.
I'm only going to read a paragraph. Is my screen up?
Let me put your screen up real quick because I gotta find your screen. Okay, go ahead.
It says the Convention on Psychotropic Substances is a United Nations treaty designed to control psychoactive drugs such as amphetamines, barbiturates, and psychedelics. During the 1960s, drug use increased greatly around the world, especially in Western nations, inspired by psychedelic advocates such as Aldous Huxley and Timothy Leary. Millions of people experimented with powerful hallucinogens and drugs of all kinds became freely available. Government authorities saw this as immoral and destructive to economic progress. The Single Convention on Narcotics of 1961 could not ban the many newly discovered psychotropics since its scope was limited to drugs with cannabis, coca, and opium-like effects. Now, as far as legalization is concerned, that is something that actually has been tried. As far as decriminalization is concerned, many different countries have implemented decriminalization in Argentina, in Chile, in Portugal, and
Right.
the effects of it are not all the same. So this author is pointing out a very rosy picture, the ideal of what legalization would look like. Ideally it would look this way, but when you look at the reality of why they even needed to do the 1971 convention, it was because LSD and all of that was legal, freely available. People was taking it, and it was having disastrous consequences. So when we're talking about trying something, we have to realize that this has actually already been tried, and these governments saw it as a problem, as well as the fact of what I was trying to say when it came to the pharmacy regulations. All of these chemicals, all of these substances are restricted for, it says it, for medical or scientific purposes, and it has to be issued. A permit has to be issued by the minister of public health. But if that is not clear enough, because it seems like it's not to you, again, I shared you that article written by the Ethiopian doctors that says that the basis of Ethiopia's adherence to the 1961 and the 1971 convention are the pharmacy regulations, and what else? The penal code. So now, if the pharmacy regulations isn't clear enough, let's look at the penal code and see how this relates to this idealist and rosy picture that this author is trying to implement, which has not been the case in Argentina, Chile, Portugal. Which, if you want me to read, I can read all of this information for you as well.
You
But
can.
but let's now talk about the penal code,
Right.
Code of 1956, right? So now in the
57.
penal code of 56,
57. Right.
hold on a second.
Penal Code of 1957. I mean, the article says 56, but it's 57.
Yeah, you're right. It is 57. That's right.
Yeah.
So penal code of 57. So in Article 786.
Mm-hmm. Hang on, I can pull it up. Yeah, let me pull it up. I have it on my computer. I can just pull that up real quick. Let me go to Penal Code. Which article?
786.
786.
Now you have it up. So read 786.
786, control of toxic substances and drugs. Whosoever, apart from the cases punishable under the Penal Code, Article 510, A, manufactures or prepares, sells, offers for sale, delivers, or gives without lawful permission or an express medical prescription, where such are required, substances or products which are narcotic, toxic, poisonous, noxious, or dangerous for the health, or B, in defiance of rules prescribed by law or the rules dictated by common prudence, willfully sells, offers for sale, or delivers such substances or products, even when their delivery is not expressly prohibited without an authorization, to persons who are irresponsible, to infants or young persons, sick persons, or individuals for whom they are manifestly dangerous or unsuitable, or C, keeps or handles such substances or products without taking the precaution required by official or professional regulations, custom, or the dictates of common prudence, in particular when there is a risk of mistake or confusion, or D, fails to warn other persons of the danger of poisoning or intoxication known to him when it is his duty and he is able to do so, is punishable with fine or arrest, right?
So now, in the article that you just read,
Mm-hmm.
the author himself says meth will ruin a person's life. He said it, and I took a note of it, because these are poisonous substances, which, according to His Majesty's law, which is broad, to clearly, mean that you can't confine it because the language is broad. It says that toxic, poisonous, noxious, dangerous substances, you are subject to fine or arrest. Let's look at this again. A and B.
Yeah,
A and B of 786.
Right.
Manufactures or prepares, sells, offers to sale. So you can't do any of this when it comes to poisonous, noxious, or dangerous products.
Right.
Sells, offers to sell, delivers, or gives without lawful permission or an express medical prescription if such are required, substances or products which are narcotic. You define narcotic, right? In the pharmacy regulations. It also says toxic. It also says poisonous. It also says noxious. And it also says dangerous. So when he mentions that meth will ruin a person's life,
Right.
you don't think that that's covered underneath there. And let's look at B. It says in defiance of rules. Now B is the one. If you can't accept this, then you know, in defiance of rules prescribed by law, right? His Majesty's law is talking about, right? In defiance of rules prescribed by law, or the rules dictated by common prudence. What's that? Or the rules dictated by common sense, common prudence, common wisdom, common knowledge, that you are going to try to legalize. You are trying to legalize dangerous chemicals. It says the rules of common sense. This is what the law is saying. How do you interpret common prudence? Right? It says in defiance of rules prescribed by law, or the rules dictated by common prudence, willfully sells, offers for sale, or delivers such substances or products. Look at this next line here. Even when their delivery is not expressly prohibited without an authorization. Oh man, you can't get around that. It does not matter what you quote. It says even when their delivery is not expressly prohibited without an authorization, you are subject to arrest.
Well, right.
Harmful, toxic, poisonous substances. Now you telling me that when it says that when even the author of that article says meth will ruin a person's life, you're telling me that that's not covered underneath this law?
So if you look at B, it says even when their delivery is not expressly prohibited without an authorization to persons who are irresponsible, to infants or young persons, sick persons, or individuals for whom they are manifestly dangerous or unsuitable. I mean,
so it's not dangerous to a person if it's going to ruin their life.
Right. No, you make a good point here with what is this 786 A and B. So this clause right here, even when their delivery is not expressly prohibited without an authorization, that's the issue with me, because even though that one article says that the basis for 1971 psychotropic substances is the 1964 pharmacy regulations, it's really not. It's because Ethiopia signed the treaty. So the 64 pharmacy regulations do not expressly prohibit the psychotropic substances of 1971 in the convention, right? But to persons who are irresponsible, to infants or young persons, sick persons, or individuals for whom they are manifestly dangerous or unsuitable, I mean, I guess you could argue at this point that they are manifestly dangerous to all people, right? Because
if it's going to ruin a person's life, right? And I can, if you need me to bring up the dangerous effects of crystal meth, but you're an intelligent person,
right?
So I'm not going to insult your intelligence.
Well, the argument.
And the thing is this.
Right.
The thing is this. The issue is if you can accept, right? And again, I don't want to have to argue how dangerous these chemicals are, because I don't want to insult your intelligence. But if you can accept the danger involved with these chemicals, then you have to realize what this law is saying. Now, there are going to be, again, countries that decriminalize, right? Just like California decriminalized cannabis, and you don't agree with that, and that is something I can't argue with you about. because that's clearly against His Majesty's law. It's clear, right? His Majesty signed the 61 Convention. Cannabis is
Expressly
included.
prohibited. It's expressly prohibited in the law, right?
It is prohibited, right?
Right.
So now, when it comes to again, the fact that that article states that Ethiopia's adherence to the 61 Convention and the 71 Convention are both the pharmacy regulation and the penal code. I mean, this law right here, once you realize that you're dealing with a dangerous substance, okay, and it's saying what is it saying? Whether or not, even
right.
when their delivery is not expressly prohibited, even when that is not expressly prohibited, openly prohibited, even when it's not, it still is, which falls back into that law that says ignorance of the law is not an excuse. Once you know it is dangerous, that's it. It's illegal. That's what it's saying. It's saying narcotics, toxins, poisons, noxious, dangerous substances are illegal. Now, again, whatever someone chooses to do in whatever country, because again, there are a lot of studies that's going on when it comes to this right now. And there are countries that are trying to implement decriminalization processes. But the question is not what other countries are doing or what another author's opinion is. The question is, what is His Majesty's position? And that's why the title of this is, did Haile Selassie legalize psychotropic substances? Now, if you're going to say that His Majesty legalized psychotropic substances which can kill you, then how does this fit into the law that you just read?
Well, I mean, the only other explanation I have for the legalization of psychotropic substances, if we are going to base Article 786 as the basis for the criminalization of psychotropic substances, the only other explanation here is that person who whosoever manufactures, prepares, sells, offers for sale, delivers, or gives without lawful permission or an express medical prescription where such are required, substances or products which are narcotic, toxic, poisonous, noxious, or dangerous for the health, or in defiance of rules prescribed by law or the rules dictated by common prudence, willfully sells, offers for sale, or delivers such substances or products, even when their delivery is not expressly prohibited without an authorization, to persons who are irresponsible, right? So if we're talking about people who are responsible, let's just say, for instance, we say that the person is delivering substances which are not expressly prohibited without authorization to responsible individuals, to individuals who are not infants or young persons or sick persons or individuals whom are manifestly dangerous or unsuitable for, right? Let's just say
look at that last one.
Right. But let's just
individuals for whom they are manifestly dangerous.
For the sake of argument, let's just say that persons who are not considered irresponsible do not fall under this umbrella, for the sake of argument, right? Individuals whom they are manifestly dangerous or unsuitable, right? Let's just say
the question is this: whether you're responsible or irresponsible, the question is, are these chemicals, are these substances, are these psychotropic substances harmful to a person? Because again, individuals for whom they are manifestly dangerous, these things are going to kill you. Crystal meth is going to kill you.
Potentially.
Effects.
Potentially, let's say an irresponsible person were to smoke crystal meth and ends up dying because they don't know anything about it, right? I mean, potentially that is manifestly dangerous or unsuitable for them, right? For whom, right? So like all I'm saying is if we examine this clause right here and we're saying that for the sake of argument, Omar, I'm not saying this is how I'm interpreting it. I'm just saying for the sake of argument, people who are considered responsible, let's just say they don't fall under this umbrella, because there are some people who are considered psychonauts, for instance. They're like astronauts, but for psychedelic chemicals. And they, like the guy, there's a guy, Dr. Alex Shulgin. He wrote the books Pikal and Tikal, right? So this is phenethylamines I have known and loved. And then he explains the synthesis of these chemicals, and he explains all of the dosages and how he came about these substances. He has Tikal, which is tryptamines I have known and loved, and then he has a bunch of these are listed in the psychotropic substances, right? DMT, DBT, right? All of these, he's written books about these, right? So let's just say the guy is a chemist and he is responsible, and for the sake of argument, he doesn't fall under this umbrella of...
He can't. There's no way that you don't fall under this umbrella.
Well, for the sake of argument.
Because, and here's for the sake of argument, the reason why everyone falls under this umbrella is because these chemicals have negative and harmful effects on everyone's body. You would have to make an argument that crystal meth somehow does not have a harmful effect on a human being.
Well, this is the point I was trying to make, Omar, is that when we go back to, let me just make sure here, we go back to the points that this guy listed, Mark J. Victor, or whatever his name is. When we go back to these points, right, all dangerous clandestine meth labs in residential neighborhoods would close. All dangerous street gangs would be out of the meth business. Every dime currently spent on meth prohibition could be spent on real crime. Meth addicts would have no legal disincentive to seek help. Right here, number 5, the manufacture of meth would be safe and produce a consistent product, right? And this goes back to the pharmacy regulations where because methamphetamine is in the United States pharmacopoeia. So it does fall under the definition of a drug in the 1964 pharmacy regulation. But because it's illegal and very difficult to get, even with the prescription, the illegal market produces meth with an inconsistent purity, apparently, which causes even more harm. Now, I just talked recently to somebody who uses ecstasy, right? And they said that their ecstasy, which is MDMA, is now being cut or made with fentanyl. And like, if you see right here on this page, it says fentanyl, like even this small amount, the small amount to a penny, right? And fentanyl is illegal, by the way, under the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. But this amount of fentanyl will kill a person, literally kill a person. So it says here, just so you know, I'm not making this up, it says illegal fentanyl is being mixed with other drugs such as cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and MDMA. This is especially dangerous because people are often unaware that fentanyl has been added, right? So if crystal meth is illegal and it's causing the manufacture of meth to be unsafe and produce an inconsistent product cut with other chemicals that can kill you, such as fentanyl, right? Then the argument for legalization is again back to the point where I was saying how there are unintended consequences as well as intended, like we have intended consequences for criminalizing certain substances. Does that make sense?
Well, the thing is that we could, and this keeps in line with the pharmacy regulations, to restrict it to medical and scientific purposes. I don't have no problem with that, and we have established that this is where it should be at. But confining it to the medical and scientific purposes is making it illegal for the general public. That's the opposite of legalization. We can't argue for legalization, which is now going to make it freely available, and then say that, okay, well, we're just going to confine it to the medical and scientific realm. So that's gonna cause a contradiction, and that in real terms is what all of these countries are dealing with right now. It's what California is dealing with right now. California has decriminalized cannabis, and what the result has been is that they have said, you know, you got to get this permit, which costs money. You got to open up a store, and you got to pay your rent, which costs money. And what happens in this is what's really happening is that most of the weed sales are still taking place under the market. What do you do with a market that's already established? It's already there. What are you going to tell the Mexicans, the Mexican cartel, when crystal meth is legalized, and you can't tell them nothing when it's already illegal? You think that you're gonna somehow, what you gonna tell them?
Well,
I mean, they're gonna do whatever they want to do, and
right?
But still, they already have an established market.
The point I was making, though, I might be able to share my screen on this too. The point I'm making with that with the regulations, right? Because we're talking about regulation rather than, I mean, when we talk about decriminalization and legalization, we're talking about, you know, people not cooking this in their basement, right, with fentanyl. But
how are you going to stop them?
Well, this is how it stops. It's from this article right here, Meth Madness at Newsweek, by Jack Schaefer. He says in here that let me see if I can find it. Apparently, when the drug is legal, and methamphetamine, and again, these psychotropic substances are it's very finicky. Like it's not just like cannabis where you or cocaine where you criminalize it and the use goes down. Like if you criminalize the psychotropic substances, then there's all these unintended consequences. And it says right here, like it says, by cutting the legal supply to a trickle, the government signaled to drug dealers and would-be drug dealers that they could collect substantial profits from an established clientele if they started manufacturing amphetamines. So as pharmaceutical grade stuff left the market illicitly, synthesized drugs of dubious purity and potency replaced them. Gresham's law applied to drugs, making the drug-taking experience more dangerous. The shift to clandestinely made amphetamines also resulted in toxic waste nightmares when chemists abandoned their labs in abandoned their labs in 1988. Let me just see if this is the part, because apparently the government or big pharma or whoever's making methamphetamine, apparently, according to this article, they can make the pill for like a penny, right? And then that penny can be distributed illegally. People that obtain a prescription can illegally distribute that, right? But
well, here's the thing.
But people who are cooking it, they cannot make a profit when it's that cheap. That's the argument. The argument is that when you legalize it, I'm looking for it right now. I can't find it.
No, I understand the point.
You understand the point?
I understand the point that you're saying that if it's made by the professionals, then it's going to be made safer and it's going to be cheaper, which is going to put out the cartels.
Right.
The cartels out of business. Right. I get it. Right. However, that point is again very, very, very idealistic. Now, you heard about this guy, the farmer bro who got the Wu-Tang CD. You heard about him? His name is Martin Schreckle or something like that.
Yeah, he increased like the price of like some kind of medication like HIV.
Now, he's not the only one who does that. Okay. And the reason why they highlighted him was because of a much larger problem, right? And within the whole drug industry, the legal drug industry, which is the fact that in America, the price of drugs is so ridiculously high as opposed to other countries, right? So people are going to Mexico to get like their legal drugs because they can't afford it, their dialysis because they can't afford these things in America, right? So when we're talking about it in a real world aspect, we have to look at, you know, what's going on. Now, I'm gonna tell you this: what you have read, in regards to the government producing a cheap product that will put out drug dealers, that may work. That may work in some places, but that actually is not realistic all around the globe. That is idealism. That's not realistically how that's going to play out. You know, because when we look at um, different governments. So let me share. Can you share my screen?
Yeah, you got to press the button again to present.
Oh, I gotta press it again.
I think so.
Let me press it again. Share screen.
Okay, there you
am
go.
I up?
Yep.
All right. So when we talk about different governments around the world, different governments have different problems that they are that they have that they're going up against, right? So Ethiopia's problem is going to be different than another country's problem. So look at the corruption. It says for Ethiopia, there's no evidence of government corruption related to illicit drugs. There's a whole bunch of countries on here, okay? But I'll just go to the next one, Ghana. Just the point that I'm trying to make,
Yeah.
is about the different experiences that each country has, right? So corruption in Ghana. Corruption does not exist as a matter of government policy, encourage or facilitate illicit production or distribution of narcotic or psychotropic drugs or other controlled substances, or the laundering of proceeds from illegal drug transactions, nor is any senior official known to engage and encourage or facilitate narcotics production or trafficking. Despite the regular arrests of suspected narcotic traffickers, Ghana has an extremely low rate of conviction, which law enforcement officials indicate is likely due primarily to corruption within the judicial system. The backlog of cases pending trial and limited resources facing the judiciary remain problems in controlling drug trafficking in Ghana. In All right, so the point that I'm trying to make, and again, I can go through more, right? But the point that I'm trying to make is that, again, there's a different experience within these different countries. So in some countries, like I don't want to name off the countries, because it's like, you know, that's gonna be a you know, people are going to be offended by that, right? But you know, I will just say corruption does exist. Okay, corruption does exist in these different countries, and it's not all going to be the same. And you have to take that in consideration when you are talking about establishing policy, right? Because again, if you don't take what I'm saying off of my word that every country is not going to implement things the same, then we can just look at that document some more, and I'll just go through it even more. But that's the reality. That's a reality that these different countries have a different experience. So when you are calling for the legalization, you can't just look at the ideal picture. You just can't say, well, ideally, this is how I want it to play out, and then expect it to actually work that way. You have to take into consideration the different cultures, the different governments, the different set of values, the different set of morals, you know, because whether or not we are aware of this or not, I mean, governments, a lot of people, especially within Rastafari, they don't deal with politics because of all of the corruption involved with politics, and that's because the Rastafari community has been the victim of government policy. Maybe to a certain extent that has to do with them breaking the law with cannabis, but the reality is that they have been, abused. They've been thrown in jail, and for their logic, it has been because of a religious infringement on their rights to worship as they please. Whatever the case may be, whether it is religion, whether it is race, whether they are economic, whether they are economic reasons, the reality of world history is that there are groups that have been systematically targeted by certain governments. So when you're talking about drugs, you also have to ask yourself where what communities are being hit, with these drugs. Like, why is it so prevalent in certain communities? Why is there corruption in certain governments? You have to take all of these things in consideration when you're talking about policy. And when you're talking about Haile Selassie and when you're dictating his law, you have to understand that his law doesn't have any, God's law doesn't have any exceptions to it. It has to be absolute. It has to be an absolute, definitive law that applies to everybody. Because if it doesn't, if there are cases where you say, okay, well, you legalize it, you don't legalize it, you legalize it, you don't legalize it, and we're going to have to keep an eye on you, and because you're not doing the right thing, and we have to make amendments to you, then that tells you that that's not God's law. That's not what God's law is. So the laws of Ethiopia in relation to their own unique problems with drugs are confined to that country, and actually only apply to that country, because the problems in Ethiopia are not the problems in Kenya. They are not the problems in Ghana. They are not the problems in Nigeria. So to call for legalization in all of these countries, and to expect that the government is going to price out the drug dealers, when even if you want to talk about Mexico, these governments are working with them. The guy who's running it in Mexico, when it comes to those cartels, he's never been arrested in life. He's never been arrested. And the amount of blood that's on his hands is like unbelievable. And when they do raids on his house, he somehow knows about it and knows how to disappear. So when you have to take all of this into consideration when you are dictating policy, and when you say, well, we're going to legalize it, and what's going to happen is that the government is going to produce a safe product that's going to price out the drug dealers. Like, in how many countries realistically is that going to happen? Because I can tell you that that's idealism. That's not going to happen in Mexico, and that's not going to happen in a lot of countries.
Okay, before
does not look the same from one country to the next.
Okay, but I feel like we're going to the next topic with that segue. But let me just give one more unintended consequence to criminalizing psychotropic substances, and then we can talk about the global implementation of Haile Selassie's laws, right? Because I know we were supposed to talk about that too. So hang on. So let me just say this: with the unintended consequences, considering the psychotropic substances convention, it says this is a quote by Hamilton Morris. He is a chemist. He's a scientist. He makes a show on Vice called Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, and he actually does like little history lessons on like the people who first created like ecstasy or LSD or whatever. He goes and visits them, interviews them. He tries the drug. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like this little fascinating document.
I'm aware of it.
Right. So then he said this in one of his episodes. I think it was like season 2, episode 6 or something. The episode about MDMA. He said, as the government began to restrict chemicals and scientific equipment, curious adolescents and clandestine chemists alike faced new obstacles in pursuing their interests. The manufacture of psychedelics moved to China, where controlled substances are replaced by uncontrolled derivatives that are sold without restriction to consumers in the US. The result has been the distribution of hundreds of new drugs and the loss of a culture of citizen science that once thrived in America. All the measures that have been taken to prevent clandestine synthesis in the United States have only prevented young people from becoming interested in chemistry. If you don't have practical experience playing around in a lab, you'll never be interested in chemistry, and chemistry is a beautiful thing that actually makes the world a better place. So that's just another unintended consequence of criminalizing the psychotropic substances, is that you're really just discouraging people from chemistry. That's just
we have established with the pharmacy law that we agree that it should be confined to medical and scientific purposes.
Regulated, right? Regulated by the government or
so
whatever.
For science, we have agreed with that, but not for legalization.
Well, I mean, if you look at what I was going to say was, when Hamilton Morris goes to interview these chemists, a lot of their lives were ruined because they were doing synthesis, chemical synthesis of these substances. Now, again, some were selling them, I guess, illegally because they were illegal according to the U.S.'s signature on the psychotropic substances. But like some of these chemists were just making and experimenting with drugs, and they had their lives ruined. And they're actually like prominent, like actual scientists and chemists. But that was just one last point, because I really wanted to talk to you about the global implementation of Haile Selassie's laws, because you pointed out that not every government is going to be able to implement. Is this the line you were going down with the corruption? You were pointing out that some governments are like, the corruption in one government is different than the corruption in another government, which would not nullify, but maybe the laws of Imperial Ethiopia wouldn't be effective in Mexico. Like, is that kind of what you were getting?
Well, yeah, what I'm saying is that the idea that you are presenting is idealist when it comes to believing that by legalizing these substances, the government will produce a safe product, a cost-efficient product that's going to price out these drug dealers. When the reality of a lot of these countries is that the government plays a role within these drugs coming in and within the sale itself.
You said the government.
The government. All right. So let me pull up a. Go ahead and share my screen.
Share the screen. Okay.
Am I up?
Yeah.
All right. So this is a study of different countries in relation to their war on drugs, the enforcement of their laws, as well as the study of corruption. All right, so the one country that we have, Nigeria. They always say that this is the most corrupt country. Corruption is entrenched in Nigerian society and remains a significant barrier to effective narcotics enforcement. And this just comes with a worldview and an understanding of how things are. of how it really plays out. Like, you know, we may believe, like someone who comes from a political background, where they believe in their government, that their government won't do no harm, and that their government is a beautiful republic that has everyone's best interests at heart. Someone who comes from that understanding may not think that corruption exists, but it comes with an understanding of the world. Look at Russia. I mean, we can go and look at what Russia's doing when it comes to their fight against drugs. And I mean, they are torturing people, when it comes to them being drug users. So if you're going to speak about how this is going to be implemented globally according to that same standard that you said is going to be your thesis, then yes, explain to me how you're going to do that when corruption is most definitely a factor, really in every government. So how is it going to play out ideally like that in every country?
So I guess for the corruption argument, I would just say that Haile Selassie had provisions against corruption. I mean, that's even in the penal code. He had provisions against that. If those were enforced, then that would end the corruption, right? But you would have to.
I mean, come on now. That really. I mean, in their laws itself, they are against corruption. So that's what I was reading in the case of Kenya, that they say that they are against corruption, but yet, there's no one facing any penalties for these crimes. So, I mean, again, we can't.
Well, I'll consider that. That's a good point. Like let me consider. Let me write that one down. I'll consider that one. But when it comes to the laws, right? Because you had mentioned earlier that maybe one nation's morals are different than the other, and the point I'm trying to make with Haile Selassie's laws is that it would make morality uniform, right? Because I don't know if you saw yesterday, somebody in Palestine was just beheaded, for being a homosexual. Now, if you look at Haile Selassie's laws, for instance, Haile.
Listen, I'm not
But
sure what you want.
I just want to make the point is that Haile Selassie's laws, he didn't actually imprison homosexual people for being homosexual, right? He imprisoned people for homosexual acts. Am I right about that assessment?
I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously, yeah. I'm agree with that. That it's going to be the act, right?
Right. I mean, I would be. I mean, I was when it came to His Majesty's laws about homosexuality, like I was vehemently opposed because I felt like it wasn't strict enough and he wasn't doing enough. But really, if you look at it, at the end of the day, I have to concede that it is the act. So just because a person is homosexual doesn't mean that they would be prosecuted. But it appears in Palestine that the individual was beheaded just for, I guess, being gay or something. I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is with the laws, humanity's moral compass isn't uniform right now. You know what I mean? Everyone has their own ideas of what morals are. But when Haile Selassie established his kingdom on earth and established his theocracy and government and created laws, right? I believe that gives a good basis for morality on a global scale, whether there's corruption in a government or not. I mean,
So we can say that His Majesty, knowing that he is God, everyone can learn from him, and everyone can take instruction and guidance on how to live a moral life. His Majesty's laws, yes, are a basis for everyone to adhere to. And if you do adhere to them, then I mean that is actually going to benefit everyone around the world. But that actually comes to a certain only to a certain point. And the reason why I say that is because His Majesty gave a speech where he said, "We do not want you to return to Ethiopia, Americans or Canadians. American techniques in their entirety may be good only in America, and Canadian training will be especially applicable to conditions in that country. We hope that you will be wise in choosing those elements from foreign education which are applicable to conditions in Ethiopia, which can be used in our own country." So that was his instructions to the Ethiopian students, is that he didn't want them to return from America as Americans and to return to Ethiopia as Canadians and trying to make Ethiopia into an America or into a new Canada. And on that same token, Americans should not be trying to change America into Ethiopia. Don't you see that it works both ways? That within every country there is a culture and a specific problem that needs to be addressed that's unique to that country. We're not here to turn America into Ethiopia, just as His Majesty wasn't trying to turn Ethiopia into America. That's the beauty of the world. The beauty of the world comes in with different cultures, and the Serbs have the right to be proud of their culture, just as the Nigerians, just as the South Africans. They have their culture, and they have that right to live that and to have that experience. We can only. His Majesty said it himself. You study all, but you take the good. Within His Majesty's law, he had provisions where alcohol was legal, but in certain countries it's illegal. Who are we to tell them? Who are we to tell them that you have to make it legal?
We are the Church of God. God damn it! Like, who do you mean? Who are
No,
we?
that's not how it works.
But that should be
now
how.
what you have to think about, what you have to consider again, is what His Majesty said. Again, you can't just brush over these things. That he wasn't trying to change every country into Ethiopia. It doesn't. He said it himself. You see, and again, what you have to consider is what is the morality test, and the standards of morality. You're saying that the standards of morality can be universal, but that's not realistic either, because not all people entertain the same views. So now you're saying that everyone needs to believe the same thing, have the same culture, have the same views, have the same laws.
Have the same laws. I'm saying have the same laws. I don't know about culture and everything else. I'm saying have the same laws.
Culture is going to tie into their morality and their values, and that's going to tie into the case of alcoholism. And why would you advocate for alcohol when you know it's harmful? Why would you advocate for these harmful substances? That's not what His Majesty's law is saying. His Majesty's law does not legalize any harmful substance. So where there's a country, one of these countries that has alcohol illegal, there's no point, if it's going to be a question of morality, of telling them you need to make it legal. What about the age of consent for marriage? Wasn't it 15 in Ethiopia? So now that needs to change for all countries.
I thought it was 18.
All right. Well, if it's 18, then it's 18. But the thing is that these laws, have to be, only suited for this specific country,
But
and it has to be molded to that specific country.
But can we really say that? Because it's almost like, okay, so because you live in the borders of whatever country, because you live in China, you do not have to follow Haile Selassie when he says whatever provision, right? Isn't that kind of like contradictory? Like it's almost kind of like if His Majesty, you know what I mean?
What we have to do first of all, when it comes to Haile Selassie, is that just like His Majesty said, we only have our moral persuasion. First of all, it's gonna be based off consent, whether or not they're going to follow His Majesty's laws or not. That's going to be based off of their consent.
But you think they shouldn't, though, right? Your premise is that they shouldn't follow Haile Selassie's laws because they have their own problems, right?
No, what I'm saying is that every country, just as His Majesty instructed just as he instructed his students to take the good from America and bring that to Ethiopia, every country must take what's applicable to their country from His Majesty's laws, where it will benefit their country.
Okay, I mean, I guess that makes sense, but I don't see where we're taking all the laws in their totality would be detrimental. I see.
Well, I did not say all of the laws in their totality. So we're on a discussion about the global implementation of His Majesty's laws.
Right.
And that really does not fit into what he was saying and his instructions. His instructions was to take the good and bring that back to the country. Because when we're talking about secular laws, I mean, yes, His Majesty's law is a great law, and it's a moral code, right? But you can't implement it everywhere. First of all, Haile Selassie, when he came back to the throne in the 40s, he was working on land reform all the way up until he was overthrown. That reform still did not go. He still didn't complete it. Land reform was an issue that the Ethiopians revolted against him, said he was stagnant, said he was unfit for the job, and he needed to be removed. Right? So the problems of Ethiopia, you can't say that, you can't apply that to other countries. What other countries must do is take the good. So a monarchy is not going to work, right, in other countries. His Majesty said all these things about democracy and republics.
Right.
So again, we're gonna have to accept that and stop trying to say that this can be applied everywhere. What can be applied everywhere is what works. Is what is universal, and that doesn't apply to all of His Majesty's laws.
Well,
when it comes to the secular realm,
right? Because when you give a good point too, when you say, well, the people in England, they drive on the left-hand side of the street, right? So are they supposed to follow Haile Selassie's roadway system, right? That was one of the objections you gave me earlier. But I would say, if I cite Civil Code from 1960, the Civil Code 1498. It says that the customs of a community should be amended by the minister unless it's unreasonable. I think that would fall under unreasonable. Like, that would be unreasonable to say, hey, you've been driving on the left hand side of the street for 100 years, for over a century. You know, now you got to switch it because Haile Selassie said so in 1944 or whatever, right? But like
Well,
when it
there's going
comes,
to be a lot of things that's going to fall under what people are going to consider reasonable and unreasonable.
well, that's my question. So how do you define? Because in my opinion, like an entire roadway system that's been there for a century, that's kind of unreasonable. But like when you say that, you know, like alcohol or some of these other principles that can be universally applied, right? I mean,
Why would alcohol? Why would you, just like I'm asking, why would you advocate for crystal meth? Why would you advocate for alcohol to be implemented when it has negative and harmful effects on people?
well, I think we should look at when it comes to meth or alcohol. I think we should look at unintended consequences when it comes to criminalization, such as prohibition in America. You know, or organized crime like skyrocketed. You know, you have people home brewing. I know in Saudi Arabia, people make their own alcohol in stills in their homes, and you know they get raided and stuff. But it's like, you know, it's because the purity is a question too. There's some kind of moonshine. If you drink it, if you make moonshine incorrectly, you can go blind. You know, it's not
Well,
regulated.
the question that I'm
People are imprisoned unjustly. You see.
the question that I'm alluding to when it comes to this is in regards to how does it relate within His Majesty's law that restricts harmful substances, right? So let me read something to you. Again, that Penal Code 786,
786.
right? That Penal Code 786 does prohibit toxins, poisons, drugs, narcotics,
Right.
dangerous substances, right?
Right.
But
Right.
let me read something to you, and you should be familiar with it because it comes from your page. So this is from the legal systems of Ethiopia. It says, with respect to the penal code, Professor Raven points out that it was necessary to reconcile tradition and progress. The question was whether the foundation of the code was to be the penal punishment of offenders or the rehabilitation of those who have engaged in antisocial conduct. Should the provisions be designed to deter antisocial conduct by imposing a threat of punishment, or to treat and correct such conduct after it has occurred? You remember this quote, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Hmm.
Okay, so Professor Raven further emphasized that since the concepts of fault deterrence and expiatory punishment were deeply ingrained in the Ethiopian mind and tradition, they cannot be abandoned. The code had to be drafted with reference to these concepts, the need for the preservation of public order, the essential condition for the development of the society, outweigh considerations of rehabilitation. Thus, the foundation of the penal code is the penal punishment of offenders, as to whom deterrence has not proved effective, rather than rehabilitation, although provisions for rehabilitation still exist. Look, I'm not against rehabilitation at all. So if you're going to argue for transcendental meditation, if you're going to argue that these people have a weak complex and they need to seek some kind of rehab, I I'm all for that. But again, legalization legalization of dangerous chemicals, that is a serious matter. That is a serious matter, and it is not the position of the church order to declare. When we're talking about church, when we're talking about a church order, a religious order, what you're dealing with in a church, and this is where you have to recognize the separation between the church and the secular realm, right? Because they speak on two different levels, right? So when you're talking about a church, you're talking about a place where people are looking to better themselves. You're talking about where someone is trying to get to their higher self. And when you're talking about that, and when you're dealing with people trying to rehabilitate themselves,
then what you have to realize is that if you're telling them that these things are legal, you have to realize the ramifications of these statements. That's going to have negative consequences to a lot of people, as well as that doesn't fit in with His Majesty's penal code. He had it so that punishment was there, which does not mean that they cannot be rehabilitated. But because punishment is there, that means that it's restricted. Now, whether or not we're gonna throw someone in the dirt like Russia does, no, we're not gonna do that, right? So punishment is something that can be enforced in different ways, but punishment definitely does not make it legal. And His Majesty's Penal Code, again, 786, it restricts all of these substances, and it is broad to include substances that's included within the 61 convention, 71 convention, and the new substances that haven't been regulated that's on the market yet. So what he was trying to do, if you're going to think about it in the religious aspect, when it comes to us trying to be our best, is that he's saying he's deterring us away from these things. He's not advocating for them. He's not legalizing them. That doesn't fit in with punishment. He's pushing us away from harmful whatever that substance may be, whether that is substances in the past or substances that are produced now that are not regulated and in the future.
Right.
His position is to say, look, stay away from these things. They're illegal. That's what the law is saying. And that's what the punishment is. Now, after you accept the fact that it's illegal and that punishment, then how we treat that, whether that's going to be through yoga or, because there's a lot of things that leads people to addiction. So whatever that rehabilitation may be, that's something that, again, different countries can implement in different ways and hopefully come up with effective treatments. And again, I don't have no objections to the methods that His Majesty implemented. There are other methods. I don't have a problem with methods as long as they're effective. Right, which is what His Majesty is saying in a positive interpretation. Is you're going to have to judge the effectivity.
Well, when you say, yeah, okay, but when you say, I see your point here. Well, I guess when you say we are a church, right, and we're not supposed to be encouraging people to use drugs. Obviously, I agree with that. That shouldn't have to be stated, right? But like when I see the Psychotropic Substances Convention not being signed by Haile Selassie, right? This is the way that I'm
Which
thinking.
Does not mean he objects to it, and Ethiopia did not make any objections to it.
Well, the question is why? Why on earth didn't he sign it? So then that's why I'm performing research to see, well, maybe he's like considering some unintended consequences. I want to know why, because he could have easily signed it, right? I mean, let's be honest. Ethiopia could have easily signed the convention. So that's just my I'm just saying that's my, I mean, even if you don't agree with that, that's just my fundamental.
He couldn't have easily signed it. Why is it that it's hard for him to? There's a lot of things that his government abstained from.
Well, exactly. But let me ask you this question. So like when we talk about the global implementation of Haile Selassie's laws, right, we're also talking about the international treaties that he signed, which are the supreme law of the land according to his constitution, right? And like, for instance, one of the treaties that he signed was in 1971, maybe, where, he didn't recognize the country of Taiwan, right? He said Taiwan is not a country that should be in the United Nations recognized as a sovereign nation. He said that it belonged to the Chinese Communist government, right? Are we now saying that other governments should not follow the treaties that Haile Selassie signed? or are we saying, like, what are we saying when it comes to international treaties? Because those are also included in Haile Selassie's laws, you know.
What we have to do, is recognize how to deal with people, right? So when it comes to people, you know, you have to learn how to pick your battle. So His Majesty was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, right? Where he was, you know, considered as a peacemaker. So now, when it comes to the issue of Taiwan, and when it comes to being a diplomat, the question is how we're going to approach the subject. So right now, that's a situation that could lead to war, right? Right now, they are, you know, still at odds with that. So we have to approach things, you know, with prudence. So when it comes to Taiwan, we could have a position of not recognizing it, but with anything and with everything, it's all a matter of how it's approached and how we're going to deal with the topic. So we can say we don't agree with it, but does that mean that we're going to force them? Does that mean that we're going to have to advocate for it? Because you can disagree. You can disagree with someone without trying to force them to change anything. You can just voice your opinion and say, look, I don't agree that Taiwan should be a country. Does that mean that we have to take it a step further? You know, and that has to do with a lot of things when it comes to the law. Is how exactly is it implemented? When you're talking about legalizing alcohol in Muslim countries, you're inciting a riot. You're inciting a war. For what? And the question is, how can we balance, you know, serious matters from matters that are petty? Because honestly, all matters are not the same. All laws do not have the same gravity. So here's a point that I want to make to you in regards to the order of Primus and Croix. What are the directives that we are going to choose to advocate for? What is going to be our principles? Because I spoke to you about this in private in regards to us taking on serious issues. Why in the world, with everything happening in this planet, climate change, you know, you got technology issues, you know, we can you know, talk about advocating for the order of Primus St. Croix to be scientists, engineers. We can talk about them getting involved in politics. Why in the world is the subject of legalizing crystal meth? Why is that a decision? Why do you think that that's something we should do?
Well, let me just answer that real quick because it's a very good concern. So the reason I brought this topic, the reason I even started a video with that phrase, okay? The reason I'm bringing that front and center, Omar, it's not, I haven't lost my mind, right? What I have done is and you've seen, I can't pull it up now. I guess the website's down temporarily, but you know, I'm writing articles about you know, just like the truth about Haile Selassie's legacy, right? All these misconceived notions and propaganda against the emperor, right? I'm trying to get rid of all of these excuses against and objections against his divinity, right? And when I came across the information about crystal meth, for instance, that was one of the biggest objections I've ever heard before, right? That was one of the biggest objections I've ever heard to Haile Selassie's divinity before was he legalized crystal meth, right? Like he
did not legalize it.
he didn't criminalize it, right? He didn't
It
criminalize
was
it.
criminalized. The law states that dangerous subjects are illegal,
He didn't.
which includes anything that is toxic, anything that is narcotic, any poison, whether that's going to be now or in the future, whether that's going to be regulated or unregulated. All poisons, toxins, according to the Penal Code of 786,
786
are illegal.
Right. I'm gonna go over 786 again. I'm gonna go over 786 again and see if that's actually, because that would be, hey man, I'm all for it. If that can actually, if that can be the
Well,
refutation.
it says again, that article that I shared states,
Right. I know.
that
I'm gonna
these
go back.
Ethiopian doctors state that Ethiopia's adherence to the 61 Convention and the 71 Convention is the Penal Code and the pharmacy regulation.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna read it. Don't worry. I'm gonna look into it. But when I found out that he did not sign the Psychotropic Substances Convention, that was the biggest objection to his divinity that I had come across in years. I mean, we're talking years, Omar. So like when I found out, I was like, all right, well, maybe there's a reason why, right? And that's why I started investigating.
First of all, again, you have to realize and you have to accept the fact that with him not signing it, that doesn't mean that he objected to it. That's international law. And again, the objections to, and I shared this already, the objections to the 71 convention was voiced by various countries. There's nothing from His Majesty's government. So what you would have to find, what you're going to have to find, if you're going to say that His Majesty was against that 71 conventions, is evidence of that, because him not signing it is not evidence of it. And that is international law, that countries deliberate on these conventions. And just because they don't sign it initially doesn't mean that, you know, they're against it. Okay. And again,
the reason I say that, the reason I highlight the fact that he didn't is because of the Constitution. I think whatever article is 121, where it says every treaty signed shall be the supreme law of the land. And I'm saying because he didn't sign it, it's not the supreme law of the land. But that's besides the issue. I'm gonna go back and do more research on 786. I think if you have what I think you have, that would make my life easier, because then I won't have to research 100 different kinds of psychotropic substances. I'm not a chemist. I have no chemistry background at all. The last subject I want, because we've been going on for 2 hours now. I want to get to the last topic, Omar. The last topic is the difference between a sin and a crime, right? You did the videos on sin and a crime, the differences, right? But what about my hypothesis that states that Haile Selassie told everyone that they will answer for their actions, and that those actions will be judged and based on the laws of Ethiopia. Do you have anything to say on that topic?
when did he say your actions will be based on the laws of Ethiopia?
Well, he
That's
didn't
not the
say,
quote.
he didn't say that. He said each one of us, man is mortal. Each one of us here will one day meet our maker and answer for our actions. He also he also recommended that we blend spiritual knowledge with secular knowledge. And also, if we look at the 1737 clause, the article of the Civil Code, it says something with two meanings should be interpreted positively for positive interpretation, meaning they should be rendered effective rather than ineffective. So in my interpretation, applying 1737, the positive interpretation, I would say, because Haile Selassie is God and came to earth to establish his kingdom and establish his laws and morals, then if we were to positively interpret this, that can have a dual meaning to say that he's going to judge people based on their adherence to those principles, laws, and morals in the afterlife. Like that's how I'm piecing this together.
We do not speak for the afterlife. One of the things that makes any person effective is knowing what they're good at. Is actually, you know, when it comes to a law, and when it comes to restricting yourself, morals, when you're able to restrict yourself and discipline yourself, that's the word I'm looking for. When you're able to discipline yourself, restrict yourself, limit yourself from certain things, right? When you're able to say, pornography is wrong, boom, I'm gonna stop it. Smoking weed is wrong, boom, I'm gonna stop it. When you're able to limit yourself, you see, a lot of people got it confused, and they try to take on everything, and they try to think like, the more I can take on, the better I am, which is only good to a certain point. What you have to do is you have to discipline yourself, and you have to limit yourself. You have to figure out what you're good at and what you're bad at. What's going to make you effective, what's going to make you effective is not just what you're good at, but you also going to have to work on your weaknesses as well. So I agree with that. But when it comes to His Majesty's law, you have to realize that just because we believe in his divinity doesn't make us chemists, doesn't make us lawyers, doesn't make us doctors. And there are limitations to this. To speak on the afterlife and how he will judge in the afterlife. Remember, there's quotes in the Bible that says, God will judge the reins of your heart. Right? So there's babies that you know are dying, right? When they're newborn babies that are dying. There's innocent children who are killed, right? At different ages. There are people who never even heard of Haile Selassie. There's people who cannot read. There's people who don't have TVs, who don't have the internet. There's people who died before His Majesty was born, who also have to be judged. Keep that in mind as well. When you are talking about the afterlife, that is not your realm. It's not my realm. His Majesty said we will answer to him for it. Whatever his standards are, when it comes to judging the heart, he is going to take that into consideration. What we can do is we can advise people on good morality. Good morality should also include the fact that you understand that toxic, harmful substances we're not going to advocate for, whether that's crystal meth, alcohol, because this is a church order. We're not going to advocate the legality of harmful substances because that does not fit in with the penal code, as well as it doesn't fit in with the church order. We're going to have to try to deter people to say, look, you know, let me discipline myself. You know, I have what it takes. Let me believe in myself. Let me believe in God. I can do it. Whatever the rehabilitation process is, you know, whether it's going to be the yoga with the meditation, or whether it's going to be different kind of therapies, or whether it's spirituality. Because spirituality and prayer in itself, when it comes to people saying, I believe in the name of Jesus and I'm healed, and they believe it, you know, whatever the rehabilitation process is, as a church order, you know, we're going to have to stand for the spiritual aspect of people taking ownership for their life, discipline themselves, believing in themselves, and not seeking out, you know, outside substances, unless, you know, they're mentally ill for medical purposes or scientific purposes. But everything else is illegal. And again, we can't speak on things, just like you mentioned the Corinthians, who has the mind of God. We're not gonna we don't have that mind to say what he's going to judge in the afterlife. We don't have that's he said it himself that he's the one who's going to do that. What's going to make us effective? What makes us effective is when we know what our role is. Now listen, whether you choose to fight against me and go against me or not, right? Whether you choose to say that you're the one who's dictating the order of Primus St. Croix, I'm gonna explain something to you. The reason that I'm effective in what I do is because I know my part. Just like Kenyatta, look at the brethren. Why do you think he just sticks in the Bible? He can do other things. He has the Silver Jubilee. He has access to all of them books. Now he's limited himself, but he knows he's the man in the Bible. He knows it. And that's what makes him who he is. And that's what got him his reward. It doesn't mean that for anyone else we can't do other things, but you first have to recognize what your role is, right? You have to recognize what your role is. Our role is not going to be, we can't speak on the afterlife. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know what his standards of judgment are. You're speculating. Now, just like you speculated on what his hand sign is, you can come up with the great hypothesis, and your theory may make a lot of sense, but at the end of the day, you don't speak for that. At the end of the day, you don't speak for it. So why try to? No matter how much information you have, you don't have that standard of judgment. Just like it's like the scientists trying to come up with ideas of like how the universe was created, and then they come up with the most unscientific theory that what they say that life can't be created, it just is, which is actually a defiance of science itself, but it's like there's certain things you have to realize. There's certain limitations to this. The afterlife is one of them. We only going to know that once we get there. You may have all the information and say, look, he's going to judge you by the consolidated laws of Ethiopia, which honestly, just like I quoted how he told his students just to take what's good and bring it back, I don't see how this actually correlates with his own words, about respecting the sovereignty of other nations. We take from the good and apply it. That's his instructions. Those are his instructions. And this is in regards to secular laws. Now, when it comes to religion, then they have consented. And now if you consent, then at that point, you're going to should be able, adapt everything, right? So it is what it is, adapt everything. But even within adapting everything, why would a church order advocate for alcoholism, tobacco, when it's harmful? Even if it's within the secular law, that's not what we're going to do. We have to advocate within and keep and be mindful of spirituality, to say, look, we're trying to get people to the best version of themselves. It's not going to be within their best interest to smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol, because that has harmful effects even when it is legal. So I disagree that these psychotropic substances was legal, but even if they was legal, that's not going to be our position. Alcohol is legal, and that's not going to be our position. Tobacco's legal, and that's not our position. As a church, we're going to have to steer people to, knowledge of self, which is synonymous with the knowledge of God. So you're going to have to believe in yourself just as you believe in God, and you're going to have to believe in your ability, and you can't, create a dependency on anything, whether that's going to be, alcohol, tobacco, porn, anything that's harmful. We're trying to steer people away from that. That's the purpose of spirituality, because spirituality, again, within its own right, is a form of rehabilitation and therapy. But to advocate for crystal meth and any kind of harmful substance, whether that's alcohol or any one of these things, that's not what this church is about.
Right. Well, I like that point that you made there, but also I would just say that even though like alcohol was legal in Imperial Ethiopia, we still have the example that His Majesty set, which was he wasn't an alcoholic, right? We can tell
So
people.
why
look,
can't we use that same example to say he wasn't on crystal meth?
That's exactly what I'm doing. That's exactly what I'm saying though. Even though he didn't sign the 71 psychotropic substances, when did you ever see him using LSD? When did he ever tell anyone to use
So why call for it to be
PCP?
legalized?
Well, again, this brings me back to the global implementation of the laws, and also the idea that that humanity will be judged on the basis of the laws. If you remember, His Majesty had his own courtroom, right? And sometimes people could appeal directly to him, but many times he would just accept the ruling. Like he wouldn't hear every single appeal, right? He only heard specific appeals that he could mitigate, that were nuanced cases, right? So like when I'm reading about His Majesty and I see that he accepted the ruling on some of the cases, people that were prosecuted and given a sentence, and he judged people and accepted judgments of people based on the laws. That's where the speculation for obviously we don't know what happens. Obviously it's speculative in the afterlife, but I mean, that's where my thoughts about this topic are coming from. It's the fact that Haile Selassie accepted, Imperial Ethiopian law while he was on earth. Not only did he sign off on it, but he also accepted a judgment that was passed and sentences that were passed in conformity with those laws. And he only, went in and changed some of them on occasion, right? So it goes back to tying it together.
His Majesty was changing his laws quite frequently. Them Nagalit Gazetas was coming out pretty often. What was it, every month or something?
Something like that.
They was coming out often. Laws was repealed quite often, as well as, again, within the provisions of the law, His Majesty states that it needs to be, these laws, in order for them to be effective, it needs to be up to date, right? So he says, in order for it to be of use, the consolidated laws must be kept up to date. So the thing is that it's a living document. It's not confined to the 20th century. It also has to apply to the 21st century and to the 22nd and to the 23rd. In order for that to be true, you have to have a broad understanding of Penal Code Article 786. Because if we just confine it to one 1961 convention, then it's ineffective in the 22nd century. It's ineffective with these new substances that are quoted from the UNODC document that haven't even been regulated under the 61 or the 71 convention. So we have to have an understanding, an effective and positive interpretation of these laws that will keep people away from harmful substances. We have to adapt that perspective.
Right. No. I like I said, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna nitpick 786 because that would make my life easier. I think crystal meth should be illegal. Jesus, like why on earth would he not sign the document? So obviously I'm gonna go back and look at that. But my question is, with regards to the celestial realm, with the moral standards of his laws, I mean, is it wrong? Is it wrong, Omar, to speculate that the secular laws of Haile Selassie and Imperial Ethiopia are somehow correlated to the judgment in the afterlife? Is that wrong? Is the question. Is it wrong to speculate that?
So the thing is that The thing is this. The thing is this. And I tried to make that point to you. I don't know exactly why you're hung up on this topic, but I will I will say that we all have a different heart, we all have a different interest, and I actually admire the fact that you're coming into your own and that you are thinking on your own and you're just not following what I'm saying or following what Kenyatta is saying, that you are forging your own identity, which I which also falls in line with what His Majesty was saying in regards to the identity of all of these different countries. Everyone has their own unique identity, and I'm all for that, because that's actually the only way that you're gonna have peace of mind, is when you feel like you're being true to yourself. Now, being true to yourself also has to be balanced out with the general public. You see what I'm saying? So when it comes to when it comes to the afterlife, once again, you can say that following the secular law is going to be of consideration to His Majesty. So the thing that I was trying to tell you before is that there are people who don't read, who can't read, who there's people who was there's billions of people whose souls have to be judged, who have never seen Haile Selassie because they was born before His Majesty was manifest on earth. All of those souls have to be judged as well. The point that I'm trying to make, you can use those secular laws to live your life and to be the best person that you can be. And there's going to be nothing wrong with that, because again, we're going to answer for our actions based off of our own unique experience. So for us who've been given a certain experience and a certain education and who know certain things, we're going to have to be true to that, right? So if I would act like porn is not illegal and just like watch porn all day, and throw my life away, then, I'm going to be judged according to that, because I know it's wrong. I know it's wrong even without His Majesty's law. But with the law, it's like, for us who have the law, that these things are wrong. So it's like you're going to have to adhere to that, right? So again, His Majesty is going to judge. He's going to judge it accordingly, and it's going to be His call. It's not your call to say that it's based off of the secular law. It's not anyone's call to make. His Majesty said that, again, the Bible says He's going to judge your heart. He's going to judge your heart. It's really not, even when people say things like, I call upon Allah and my sins are wiped away, and call upon the name of Jesus and my sins are wiped away, and I believe in God and I will have forgiveness. His Majesty said that as well too. His Majesty said that I am forgiven, I know, because of for no other act other than the blood of Jesus. You remember that? You remember that, right? Do you remember that, Petar?
Yeah, right.
So he was saying forgiveness is a spiritual thing, and that's the point that I was trying to make in regards to spirituality. Spirituality is based off of the heart, and only His Majesty can read that. So keep that in mind, that there are people who don't have access to this information that you have. You put together, a very impressive digital library, which, I'm not sure how many people are reading it, but whoever is reading it, I know that they have complimented you on that, as well as you finding rare books. I have complimented you on that as well. And it's like, for us who have access to this information, it's like we're going to be held to a different standard when it comes to the judgment, as opposed to someone who can't read, someone who was born before Haile Selassie lived. So once you find the provision that says your standard of judgment does not apply to everyone, you now have to realize that you're not speaking for God at that point. You see, the secular laws cannot apply to everyone. It can't apply to people who lived before it was issued. So this now should end this conversation, and what we should do within our realm and with our jurisdiction is we must become effective. We must become the most effective organization based off of our own purpose, which again, there are a slew of topics that I believe, will be beneficial, even when it comes to, Bingy, when they say, the naked shall be clothed, the hungry shall be fed.
That's a quote by Haile Selassie too. I think they're quoting Haile Selassie when they say the naked clothed, hungry fed, aged cared for. I think that's a quote.
Yeah,
by
I think they are quoting it, but that theme, that's an effective theme. That's
poverty, hunger, and disease. That's what we're fighting.
That's effective, when it comes to what are going to be the things that the order of Primus and Croix is going to advocate for. We're going to have to advocate for something real. We're going to have to advocate for something effective. You see what I'm saying? So again, even if alcohol is legal, we're not advocating for it. Even if tobacco is legal, we're not advocating for it.
But we're not advocating for the use, or we're not advocating for the legalization, or we're not advocating for it at all.
We're not advocating for any of it. We need to adapt principles. We're going to, again, have to realize that there are a ton of issues out here. And we first have to start with the weightier matters and work our way down, as opposed to working on petty issues, which is something I spoke to you about in private as well. I'm not going to allow, with everything in this world happening, for us to start advocating for petty issues. There's too much at stake right now. Even with climate change, I mean, this is an issue where, the world is in grave danger. You got war with Russia, the issue of politics. We can be talking about political issues. We can talk about the wars. We can talk about poverty. We can talk about, racism. We can talk about
Palestine, Israel.
And Israel.
Right.
One of the things about Kenyatta that a lot of people miss, is that verse in the Bible where it says we war against spiritual wickedness in high places. And one of the things about Kenyatta was that he didn't war against the people. His war was against the Pope. His war was against the leader. Whether people realize this or not, he stood for something real. He stood up against the heart of the matter. He stood for something real. That if the institution of the Pope actually gets dismantled, and everything behind that actually gets dismantled, that will have ramifications on an enormous scale. And that is what we also have to follow. We have to take upon a challenge, right? Even when His Majesty said we must become greater in outlook, bigger in perspective. Our goals have to be something real. This is not real, man. Whether or not you want to sit up here for 2 or 3 hours talking about whether or not the 786 applies to crystal meth or not, this topic is in my opinion, it's like, you know,
You think it's
I'm trying to be as diplomatic as possible, but this
you,
really to me is a waste of time.
you think it's trivial and a waste of time, right? But I mean, again, to reiterate, I found it to be a massive objection to his divinity, which is why I find it to be important. Obviously, crystal meth. I mean, come on, like you said, compared to hunger, poverty, and disease.
So when it comes to his divinity,
right.
let's talk about his divinity now. There's a Bible quote, right, that says the fear of God is the beginning of knowledge. So the first thing that a person has to have is faith, you know, and faith comes from the heart. You know, it's a choice. And when it comes to that choice, you want people to make that on their own. You don't want to force them to do it. You want them to say, I choose this. I choose to follow Haile Selassie. I believe in him.
But how do you do that? How do you do that, Omar?
Do you do that?
That's the question.
You do that through the institution of Christ. So what I mean by that is to prove His Majesty's divinity, that comes through the Bible. The topic that you're discussing when it comes to the politics and treaties and the secular law, that comes after. You see, to first prove his divinity, you have to know the Bible. And that's where Kenyatta is immutable. And he's always going to be needed. Because the fact that he can run off 50 scriptures to 100 scriptures to 200 scriptures proving that His Majesty is who the Bible is talking about, that proves the divinity. That's step one, right? The spiritual aspect. Step two now is where we at, because we have accepted his divinity. Step two now is how we're going to live our life, which is where the Muslims have the hadith, right? This is step two now. We're saying His Majesty lived a certain way. His Majesty followed certain principles. And this is how we're going to live according to these principles. So these are two different, topics.
Right.
Divinity is not going to be proven by citing up UN treaties and secular laws, and divinity is only going to be proven through Christ. That's what makes him Christ, is that he's the one who proves that Haile Selassie is the God of the Bible. That comes through the scriptures. That comes through Christ.
But you don't think it's relevant when someone writes like a hit piece, like the romantic rewriting of Haile Selassie's legacy must stop?
What you did was incredible and great. But what you did was you argued on the secular level, which is very much needed. And also it does deter people from studying about His Majesty, right? So again, it was very much needed. But with you breaking down all of this information, and even if you're going to break down why His Majesty did not sign the 1971 convention,
right,
which again, he does not have to sign it in order for these substances to be illegal, as well as the fact that he doesn't sign it doesn't mean that he is objecting to it, because he could be deliberating on it.
Okay.
But whatever the case may be, if you write up a piece on the whatever your understanding of him not signing the 71 convention, in order to prove the divinity, a person is always going to have to go back to Christ, to the scriptures.
Right.
It's always going to be based off of the scriptures.
Right.
So what you're doing is needed, But to prove the divinity is not going to be based off of that. It's
Right.
only going to be based off of saying, look, he's the last of the Solomonic kings. It's
Right.
prophesied, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Prophesied that this throne is forever. He's the last emperor. 1,000-year reign of Christ. This is a spiritual. You see what I'm saying? This is spirituality that we're talking about. That he fulfills it. So it's only going to be divinity is only going to be proven through the scriptures. That's what Christ is for. That's what makes King Yetta King Yetta. Is that he has that locked down when it comes to proving His Majesty is God through the Bible. He gives the best right explanation. People, there's a lot of Rastas quoting scriptures talking about Christ and his kingly character, and there's a lot of people giving their own interpretation of His Majesty as a time traveler and supernatural and superstition. But Primus St. Croix, that that understanding. Let me also speak on that a little bit more. That understanding of Primus St. Croix, as far as explaining His Majesty's divinity, was always also a collective. Let me also mention that even though we give King Yetta credit as the founder, which he is, because none of us was reading the Bible before we met King Yetta. So he's the one who started all of this.
Right.
But we all studied and we all gave contributions, right? And sometimes we would say things that are wrong. Sometimes we would say, look, we would quote scriptures and be like mixing up Christ and God, and that would have to be corrected, right? And then King Yetta left, and that collective continued, right? And then when I started to say, look, well, he's fulfilled Christ, that also went through a collective. There was people who said he's Moses, right? There was objections to theories. People would put forth theories, and these theories had to be tested. So when you put forth a theory that says, the order of Primus St. Croix is going to stand on this and this and this, you have to realize you're not going past the collective here. You're gonna have to realize that you're not going to dictate this on your own. That we all are involved here. I treated you and everyone else, with open arms as a brotherhood. And I in no way gave off any sort of implication that I feel I'm better than anyone or higher than anyone. But when any directives are spring forth, whether it's from you or someone else, as I'm doing now and as I've done in the past, when people bring forth ideas that are harmful and lead people astray, I'm gonna have to say something about it, because that's the way King Yetta was. That's the school we come from. That's the school we come from. Just as he corrected me. And people can tell you the story about how they met King Yetta through me, about how King Yetta used to scream on me, because when I met King Yetta, I was with Bingy, and he used to burn me out for that, right? So he had to bring me in line, right? But whenever there's going to be something that I object to, we can do it publicly or privately. But when it comes to these kind of topics, I am going to defend it, and I am going to fight for it, because that's the school we come from, right? So whether a person is going to accept what I'm saying or not is going to be their choice. But I know again that I haven't in no way try to put anyone down or make anyone feel inferior, and I'll try to make us all feel as welcome as possible. But that should not be misunderstood to say that you're going to now dictate what the Order of Primus and Croix stands for. I actually encourage you. I encourage you to continue your work and to continue what you're doing and to continue the development of your identity. However, just keep in mind, anytime you mention the Order of Primus and Croix, I'm involved. And anytime you say something that I object to, you are going to hear from me. And when it comes to drugs, just like with alcohol and tobacco, that is not what the church is going to stand for. They're not going to advocate for these things. Now, if you want to put together an article with the Rastafari Coalition to
well, I'm writing a book, Omar. Remember, I'm writing a book, so like the information that I'm researching is not for nothing. Like, I'm putting information in a book, and I hope you agree that that I am all for making it, presenting our ideas and having everyone be able to scrutinize it. I hope you understand that I'm definitely for that no one is above reproach and that no one is above anyone else in the order. We're all equal, and I think all our ideas should be subject to scrutiny. But I'm not going to be publishing anything on this thesis that I was talking about until like today we had a discussion about it. You've opened my eyes to many more points that I haven't even considered yet, right? So it's not that I'm going to be advocating for the legalization of crystal meth.
I believe that based off of this discussion, I am grateful that you have had an open mind to listen to a different perspective.
Oh, I have, Omar. This stuff eats me. This keeps me up at night. These questions keep me up.
Let me say that again. I am grateful that you have had an open mind to a different perspective, because even when it comes to a positive interpretation, it's saying that you can go down different avenues. You can go down the avenue that says His Majesty did not sign the 1971 convention, therefore he didn't agree with it. Or you can go down the avenue that says His Majesty did not sign the 1971 convention and he must have been deliberating about it, because signing it does not necessarily mean that he objected to it. And you do not have evidence of objection, which other governments have voiced objections to the 1971 convention. The point that I'm trying to make is that with you hearing me out, and from what it seems like, you are now taking it into consideration and saying that you're not going to publish this information, is that statement, as I initially told you off top, the statement of we need to legalize crystal meth. I think you're going to have to rework that. I think you're going to have to pull that.
I'm gonna work on this, because, like I said, you've given me things to consider that I haven't considered before. So I'm definitely going to be working on it.
With you considering it, I think is going to be responsible for you to rescind that information.
But when you say we're not going to advocate, for instance, for cigarettes or alcohol, like, how can we justifiably? I guess my question is, how can we justifiably say, like, how can we advocate, for instance, for the criminalization of alcohol, for instance, like prohibition, right? Like, if our position is let's criminalize alcohol, right? I would say that that is a contradiction to His Majesty's laws. See, that's the angle I'm looking at this. Like, I remember you mentioned earlier, you said we can build upon His Majesty's laws, and His Majesty's laws are a living document, right? But I think the important part to this is that it doesn't contradict with His Majesty's laws. That's why I'm researching it so deeply. That's why I'm reading everything I can about it, because I don't want it to contradict. You see what I'm saying? I don't want to advocate or not advocate for something until I'm absolutely certain that it doesn't contradict. Obviously, crystal meth.
Let me say this, because before I answer that question, I was actually in the middle of a point, right? That you're saying that you're going to deliberate on these matters, and there's more information, and I believe that there's a better interpretation of the law, of the penal code, of 786, of the legal systems, which says that punishment is indicative in the law, right? Of the 71 Convention, which under international law, just because he didn't sign it does not mean that that he objects to it, which I don't have evidence of objection. The UN did not publish objections from his government. So there's a lot, in my opinion, that steers us in a different trajectory when it comes to making statements to say that we have to advocate for crystal meth. I believe that this is a statement that is wrong on a lot of different levels, and I would like for you, just like you're saying that you're considering these different perspectives. I believe that the responsible thing, if you're considering it and you are now seeing that there's other ways for you to interpret this information, is to rescind that information that you have put out, which says that the Order of Primus St. Croix is going to advocate for the legalization of crystal meth. I believe that statement is very irresponsible.
If I go back and review this information and I find that yes, psychotropic substances are criminalized regardless of whether the treaty was signed or not. If I make that determination, I'll absolutely rescind and reformat and rethink the position. But I just need a little more time to go back and just literally nitpick, because it's important to me. You know, I want to get it right. I remember I asked you a long time ago, you might not remember, but I asked you, I said, about another topic. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I said, Omar, before you go on, what if we're wrong? And do you remember what you told me?
What if you're wrong about what?
I don't remember what it was, but I asked you because it was important to me. And I said, Omar, hang on.
What did I say?
What if we're wrong? And you said, then we'll make it right. And that was enough. That was enough for me to, have peace of mind with that issue. And that actually led me to...
Listen, the thing is this, man. The thing is this. When you're talking about Kenyatta, and this is what you have to realize, man. When you're talking about Kenyatta, and you're talking about the Bible, you're talking about a book that's interpreted millions of different ways. What makes him the chosen one who fulfilled the 70 years was that his interpretation, just according to the positive interpretation, is the most effective. When you're talking about these laws, and you're going to deliberate on these laws again, how is it going to be effective in the 22nd century, in the 23rd century, if you're just confining it to the 1961 convention? When the law is written broadly, you have to understand that it is all interpretation.
Right.
So when you ask me if we're wrong, then we'll make it right. What that means is your perspective and your interpretation of things. You can look at, just like rehabilitation, you can look at life half empty or half full. You can look at it as a pessimist or optimist. It is in your mind. It is a mental thing, and your mental is your spirituality. So when we're talking about His Majesty's laws, we have to have the mind to say what is in the best interests of the public, and that has to be guided according with His Majesty's instructions, right? So again, you talked about the ideal picture of what it would look like by legalizing these drugs.
Right. Unintended consequences. Right.
But the thing is that, you know, that's not going to play out the same as we have already discussed. So we have to interpret things according to realistically how is it going to help people with it, and as well as how does it correlate with His Majesty's laws. How does His Majesty's law become a living document, an eternal document? How is it going to be eternal? It can't just be confined to the 20th century. How is it eternal? So you're going to have to think on those levels.
And I do. And 786 is that's your strongest point. I think I'm going to review it, 786. But I just remember what I asked you when I said, what if we're wrong? It was in relation to His Majesty's interview in 1967 when he said, this is just our history, our ancient history. And I asked you, because I had initially heard that recording to say, this is just a story, not this is just our history. And you said, no, I went back, I listened to it. He's definitely saying history. He's not saying story. And I said, Omar, what if we're wrong? And you said, then we make it right. Yeah, he does say history, but you said, then we make it right. And I went back, I listened to it again. I mean, I try to put it through different software and programs to hear it clearly.
The reason why I said it is because I knew it was history.
Right. Yeah, you knew it. But when I was listening to it, it was saying, I heard it as story, right? So I was like, oh, he said King Solomon and Sheba that's just a story. But you said, no, he says history. And I was like, really? So I went back. I mean, there's a train in the background. It's hard to hear it. But if you think history when he's saying it, it definitely makes sense that because he's speaking in broken English. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's what it was. I was like, what if we're wrong? And you were like, then we make it right. But you were right. You were right about it saying history for sure. So I'm going to consider, Omar, I do appreciate you, man. 3 hours of your day. I didn't even know you lived in California now. That's crazy to me. So 3 hours out of your day, I appreciate that. I appreciate you coming on. I'm going to strongly consider 786. Seriously, man, I really need to go back and examine these things. So because when I'm writing the book about the secular laws. That's why I have questions. You asked me like, well, I don't even understand your motivation behind the question. I mean, the question with the whole secular and the afterlife and the blending of secular and religious laws, that is because of the book that I'm writing. So my motivations and my thoughts and my questions about these things is based on the book that I'm currently writing that I hope you will be a part of, whether that's a foreword or whether that's just an entire section of the book, so that's where these questions are coming from. That's where these ideas are. That's why I'm doing all the research, like the legal research. I think we need to publish something on the legal system, right? Because 70 Years Accomplished, a great book, fantastic. Explains a very good topical guide to the Bible. It explains the spiritual matters very well. I think the new information that we have now, we're looking at over here, the Fruit of the Lips of Haile Selassie, these books right here. I just need 2 more volumes and we can have all 7 of those. I think that information I think we should publish a lot of the findings that I've come across.
Yeah, I mean the work. I mean there are many important topics that we can take on, and the work that you are doing is very important and necessary. And for those people who have questions on the 1971 convention, I believe that those those concerns are can be answered in regards to His Majesty outlawing these substances, because I don't see how it fits within legalization when the penal code has punishment of toxins, narcotics, dangerous to your body, right?
Noxious substances. I think it says noxious in there.
Yeah, it says noxious as well.
Noxious for
And
sure.
it's super broad. It's super broad, right? When it comes to it, and it says you know, and it's regards to the dangers to anyone, responsible, irresponsible, as long as it is what it says, dangerous
Right.
dangerous to the health, man, individuals for whom they are manifestly dangerous
Or unsuitable. Right.
or unsuitable,
I'm gonna
dangerous.
I'm gonna think it through for sure. And
Those substances are illegal.
Right.
Now, with them being illegal, anything that's dangerous, with it being illegal, that doesn't mean that you know rehabilitation is out of the question or we opposed to it. I'm an advocate for it, but not legality. Legality in no way fits within His Majesty's law. In no
But I
way
mean,
fits within the church order.
but Omar, like for instance, like when I go back and examine this, I'm gonna be like, all right, well, caffeine. If you take like too much caffeine, your heart can explode. You know what I mean? That's a dangerous. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm gonna be looking
Right.
at this from different angles. You know what I mean?
So this is also why we're not, as a church order, we're not going to be advocating for alcohol, tobacco, caffeine, nothing dangerous. His Majesty had to put in these laws on a secular level, these concessions for alcohol, these concessions for tobacco, a lot of things that I'm sure he doesn't agree with, cop, right? But it was a problem, or I should say, he came into a country that was thousands of years old with its own culture, and he had to, deal with the issues of trying to modernize his people and trying to better his people and try to get things, and that takes time. And he used to say to his ministers, I need y'all included in the government, right? And I need y'all, included and working with me to make things better. So, I mean, we also need to keep that in mind that we're supposed to also be looking to improve things, not to keep things as is. The document is supposed to be dynamic, right? So that means that we're not going to, again, introduce legislation that contradicts his laws, but we're supposed to be trying.
That's my concern, right?
We're supposed to be trying to make things better for the benefit of the public.
Right.
And we have to know what that means. If it is harmful to a person, we can't advocate for it.
Right.
Now, on a church level,
Right.
His Majesty had to allow caffeine and alcohol and tobacco on a secular level, but I'm sure, just like you mentioned about you mentioned something in regards to His Majesty where he doesn't do these things.
Right.
So that's where we have to follow his example, right? Because he didn't do a lot of things. Even when it came to his drinking, they say he used to nurse one cup. He hardly used to drink it, but
Nevertheless, he did, right? But
Right.
he did also give a speech that we published in regards to him warning against alcoholism and his provisions in the law against alcoholism. Right?
Right.
He didn't smoke cigarettes. He didn't chew cotton. So we have to put all of these things into consideration. He didn't take crystal meth. He didn't
Right.
take
Exactly.
psychotropic substances. So we have to
Exactly.
take all of these things into consideration to say, look, this is not the direction that we're going to take. We're
Right.
not taking that direction when it comes to a spiritual organization trying to raise people's spirituality, trying to give people hope, trying to have people believe in themselves and raise their self-esteem, and believe in themselves and believe in God, and say, look, I can overcome my dependency. Because where's the will going to come in for someone who's addicted to porn to stop doing it? Someone who's addicted to smoking weed to stop doing it? Someone, whatever the dependency may be, alcoholism, cigarettes, whatever it is, where does that come from? A lot of it comes from spirituality. Now, there's a lot of resources involved that support that, right? So you have to kind of give people like a job, and they have to have a meaningful job, and they have to like what they're doing. Like, there has to be certain infrastructure in place to support your spirituality in order for you to really thrive. But a lot of it is spiritual. So spiritual, you have to realize that spiritual is supposed to represent the purity. Even when we talk about Primus and Croix and do not use his real name, we're talking about a perfection of his message, not necessarily his message, not necessarily my message, not necessarily your message, which is why the collective cannot be disregarded and someone just say, I'm running it and I'm gonna say whatever I want to say. That's not how this works, right? We all are involved with this, and we all, like it says, iron sharpens iron, right? We all have to say, okay, well, this is how I see it, and people have to scrutinize it, and it has to be tried.
Exactly.
That's how it all came about. It never came about off of me saying one thing and then just everyone else is like, oh, because he said it, we agree with it. I was
Exactly.
scrutinized. You're going to be scrutinized. Even Kenyatta. There's a lot of brothers out there who, when we say Primus is Christ, they think that everything he says is right. And we've never mentioned that. We never mentioned it in the 70 years. We never mentioned it on the internet. At no time have we ever said that Jesus Christ is like, perfect and everything he says is perfect and he's above scrutiny. We never said anything like that. But there's people with that Christian
Mentality. Christian mentality. Right.
who think that everything he says is right, and there's no man like that, whether that's you, me,
Correct.
or anyone else. So all of our ideas have to be scrutinized. And
Exactly.
these kind of topics, what we need to do, controversial topics, difficult topics, ambiguous topics, we must adapt a perspective, just like it talks about positive interpretation. We have to have a positive and effective understanding of the law. And again, the law, you bring this information forward to me, but I have brought this information forward to you with your own sources, that the penal punishment is enshrined within this law. It's not you can't escape it. It
I
is
hope you're right. I hope you're right, because that would honestly, like, I've been down this rabbit hole of psychotropic substances. There's so much. I'm not a chemist, Omar. All this is like a foreign language to me. I'm researching all these freaking chemicals. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. It's gonna take 2 lifetimes for me to get the legal system and psychotropic substances research. So I do hope you're right. I hope 786 is the key where I can then say, even though Haile Selassie didn't sign 1971 Psychotropic Convention, Article 786, therefore, you know what I mean? Like that's what I ideally want to publish. Okay, that's what I've been going for. I am absolutely not advocating.
Look into also with that. Also, keep in mind my other point that just because he didn't sign it doesn't mean that he disagreed with it. Find disagreements, and if you can't find a disagreement to it, then consider the fact that there's a whole bunch of countries who have voiced their concerns against the 1971 convention as well.
With that point, though, I find it interesting that not every country was present, and it makes me wonder, like, why was Ethiopia not even present during? You know what I mean? Like, they invited a ton of countries, right? And like I pointed out, it was like the Vatican was there. You know what I mean? So it's like, why were there so many countries there? See, that's the thing. Haile Selassie didn't say, I'm not signing this because, or he didn't say, like, you know what I mean? He didn't. Here's a question for you. Did Haile Selassie say ever why he criminalized cannabis? Because a lot of people want to know why, and it's like, well, we can speculate and say.
Yeah, he said it because it's a harmful substance.
Right. But what I'm saying,
so he criminalized all harmful substances.
Right, but I mean, he didn't specifically say the reason I criminalized cannabis was verbatim this reason, right? He lumped cannabis.
People don't need that explanation.
Right.
So
right.
Here's the thing.
Without that explanation, people speculate. Is all I'm saying.
People actually, when it comes to his divinity, everybody wants it their way. Everyone wants it to be why this, why that, why he didn't do this, why he didn't do that. It was the same argument of the students who overthrew him. Why he didn't do this form, why he didn't do that, why he didn't do this, why he didn't do that. And that's not how it works. What we have to do is adapt the understanding of gratitude to say, I am grateful for what you have done, and I'm going to study what has been accomplished.
Right.
And from there now, I'm gonna grow and build my understanding. But to say why, what has not been undone, what he didn't do, when His Majesty himself said that he will be replaced by the oncoming generation. He put it in his law and in his speeches that this is a continuum.
Right.
Even when he mentioned it with his ministers, that the power has been given to you to participate in the government. He was asking for participation when it comes to solving problems. So we also have to take a moral perspective and a proactive perspective when it comes to solving the problems of our generation. You see what I'm saying? So again, and this also has to fit in with His Majesty's initial positions on things, right? So again, the penal code stipulates that penal punishment for harmful substances. Again, consider not only the substances under the 71 Convention. I shared a document that shows that there are over 200 new substances that are not included under the 71 Convention. Also consider the 22nd century. Also consider the 23rd.
Right.
How is it going to be effective and apply? How can it apply? It has to apply on a broad level. That these dangerous substances are prohibited. So
right. No, I will. I appreciate you coming on and voicing your opinion on that. I really do. I really do. So just in conclusion, the legal system, the legal research that I'm conducting is not pointless. Is
Well,
not a
no
waste
one's
of.
saying it's pointless. I just think that you need to confine it. I think that you are kind of making it overlap, and you are just like how people kind of confuse the role of Christ with God in the Bible. One of the best things that we did was we was able to get that point of where is it talking about God, where is it talking about Christ, and put their roles correctly. One of the biggest challenges that you are having, and it's not a trivial topic, so I'm in no way trying to belittle you on this. But one of the things that you are struggling with is categorization, putting everything in its right perspective.
The
This
blending.
goes over
I'm
here,
blending. I'm blending spiritual and secular.
and you can't do that. You have to speak about it correctly. So to blend it,
I thought I was supposed to blend it according to him, right?
you blend education, but when you're talking about the laws, you are talking the penal laws and the penal codes, you're talking about a punishment,
Right.
right? So if you're gonna blend a secular a secular punishment, right, such as you know,
3 months in jail.
yeah. So if you're gonna blend the secular punishment, then that also means that you're blending the religious, the spiritual punishment, which is going to be condemnation in hell, right? So, I mean, homosexuals more than likely are condemned in hell, and I'm not going to object to that. I'm not going to,
You're not
put
going
up,
to defend them. You're not going to
I'm not
defend
going
them.
to defend that. I'm not going to put up an argument against it.
Right, right.
But the reality is that you can only make those points to a certain point. So when you put it on the entire book, that these are the laws,
Right.
that's not that's not accurate. That's not right. It only is to a certain degree, as well as again, His Majesty is going to make that call. We're not going to make that call. What's going to make your information and what's going to make you effective is when you speak on the things that you have right. When you speaking on topics that you are right about, right? That you know for certain this is true, 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 and that you're not making assumptions and guesses about, and you're not misrepresenting His Majesty. That's what's going to make you effective is when you know what part you play. Is it your role to say what highly Selassie standards of judgment is in the afterlife? It is not my role to say what anyone's role is in life, but I know that's not a job that He gave to any man. That's His job to judge souls.
That makes sense. That actually makes sense. So real quick, you mentioned hell. You mentioned people being judged and going to hell as punishment. The whole heaven and hell dichotomy, I thought that wasn't relevant to us. I thought that was something that was like a like a Roman Catholic doctrine, right? I thought that was something that we didn't actually agree with.
Well, heaven and hell is a is an understanding
A mind
according
state.
to, right. It's a mental state according to the scriptures, right? That's the
Right.
true interpretation of it. And again, no one knows the afterlife, but His Majesty indicated that we shall answer for our deeds, right? So just as you are speculating on what that punishment is, whether or not you want to call it hell, or whether you want to give it another name for it, whatever the punishment is that His Majesty says, your life, you was a failure, you was deliberately evil, you was whatever it is, right?
Right.
Now you are subject to some kind of punishment, whether that is, some kind of, I don't believe that it's going to be a sadistic torture, but
Right.
even that's just a guess.
Right. Exactly.
I don't know what it's going to be. So that's the thing, is that I can't speak upon things that I don't know about. And that's just the point that I'm trying to make to you. When it comes to using the terminology of heaven and hell, you can call it whatever you want to call it. But what I'm referring to is that afterlife,
Right.
and us answering for our actions. What he does at that point and what is the basis for his decision, that's going to be up to him. That's the point that I'm trying to make. And I believe it's going to make this order effective, and it's going to make you effective when we categorize things correctly, when we limit ourselves to what has been revealed to us, when we deal with, because there's many things that we can deal with, when we effectively deal with the tasks and the issues that are current to our human condition. Because there's a lot of things that we can be working on. There's a lot of things that we can talk about. There's a lot of things that we can try to advocate for, to say we as a people need to be working towards economic equalization, because that will have certain effects. One of the main reasons that people are addicted to alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, all of these things that we talk about when it comes to addiction, a lot of this is a cry for help. It's hopeless. These people feel hopeless.
Right.
So what you have to do is you have to raise hope within them, and that comes with infrastructure, that comes with jobs, that comes with proper schooling, that comes with proper housing, that comes with transportation,
Community. Right. Right.
that comes with community.
Right.
Why can't we deal with things like that? Why can't that be an objective of the Order of Primus St. Croix, to say that we're gonna improve communities, we're gonna improve lives, we're gonna advocate for communities and people's lives. This whole thing about drugs, it's never going to be what we stand for. It never will be what we advocate for.
Right. Right. Okay. And I will just say before we close that the first 4 volumes I was telling you about, the Fruit of the Lips, I was able to put them into a rough translation. If I could get a better translator, like if I could get a better translation software, I might be onto something. I might be publishing these books soon. But according to like the rough Google translation, I just wanted to say that there is no mention in the first 4 volumes of the 7 Fruit of the Lips where Haile Selassie said that Christ is God. That was one of the first things that I looked at to see, like, is there somewhere in there where he said worship Jesus or Jesus is God? I didn't see anything in the first 4 volumes. Now there's still three more volumes, and the translation that I have is very rough. I mean, it's like a lot of it is just gibberish, but I do have
What I'm gonna say is that just as I feel like you jumped the gun when it comes to declaring that these psychotropic substances are legal in Ethiopia, I believe that you moved impatient with that, and I will ask you to be more patient when it comes to your actions moving forward, especially when it comes to His Majesty's speeches, right? So, like you're saying, you have a rough draft. Don't move forward when it comes to publishing this information,
right.
until you are 100% legitimate.
No, it's rough. Yeah.
And it's potent, thorough. It is seal proof, watertight.
Right.
You
It's
feel
rough.
me? And that's what it should have been. That's what it should have been when it came to this discussion right here.
Well, I mean, that's still to be determined, but I will examine that very shortly. But the with the speech books, yeah, I'm not going to publish anything until it's like perfect. I know I already gave you like the I don't know if you saw the invoice I published online. They want like $250,000 to translate the first 4 volumes by hand, right? And that's not even necessarily an accurate translation. The person that's translating it, you know what I mean? They might not even get it right. So it's like I really got to get creative here for this translation to see what it's going to do. If it was just a little more, I could share it with you. If it was just a little more accurate, that way it's not like just you're not just spending hours looking at gibberish, because it's thousands. This is 2,400 pages of Haile Selassie speeches that have never been translated before, right? So it is important. It is a very important endeavor. I'm definitely taking my time and patience on it. I want to get it perfectly translated. I do have software now that can recognize Amharic characters, right? So all the Amharic books that I have, if I just scan them, I can actually get a rough translation of them. I was able to do that with a couple of books, maybe 1 or 2 books. Yeah, 2 books on the Truth About Haile Selassie's Legacy article. I was able to get a rough translation on 2 Amharic books, which is why I was able to cite them, which is why I was able to spell the myth about Haile Selassie spending 35 million on his 80th birthday, which was actually just the total estimate of the gifts he had received, not the amount spent on the celebration. I got that from an Amharic source. So that I think that'll take our information to the next level, because if I'm able to accurately translate Amharic books, I mean, who can say they had which Rastafarian can say they had that before, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the more information, the better, and our information is only really, you know, our information is only going to be effective based off of the right interpretation. So the information is going to be one aspect, but we're going to have to put it in an effective manner. We have to give an interpretation that falls in line with common prudence, falls in line with His Majesty's position, that can't contradict what His Majesty stood for, protects the public health. Okay, so I look forward to seeing what you're gonna do with based off of this conversation. I do hope that I do hope that you will adapt principles that will, or I should say, policies, you know, that will better the community. Because even if people can buy crystal meth for 50 cents,
Right.
I still don't think that is going to better the community, because it's still going to kill them.
Right.
So I do hope that you will adapt a position, because information can be interpreted either way. Okay?
Right.
So I hope that you will interpret these things in a manner that will protect communities and uplift communities.
Right. And when you say
interpretation, that is going to be the position of the order of Primus.
Right. And when you say interpretation, what is your interpretation? Real quick before we go, I'll let you go, I promise. What is your interpretation on heaven on earth, right? Heaven manifesting on earth? Because I know you made a video saying what is heaven, and that is part of that is the understanding that Haile Selassie is God and that Primus and Croix is prophet. But the other part of that is that the secular laws is that what is heaven on earth according to your understanding?
Well, heaven is a understanding, a theological understanding of His Majesty as God and Christ. Having that biblical understanding, having the Bible correct, is now going to lead you to having a peace of mind. Now, that also correlates with your life, right? Which is now where we have the secular laws, right? So it does these things when it comes to heaven, when it comes to heaven on earth. Yes, it does all play a role, right? The spiritual and the
material. Just like His Majesty said, they must keep pace. They both play a role in a person's composition, in a person's perspective, thoughts, how they feel about themselves, their happiness, their goals that they choose to take on. It all plays a part, right? And this is, once you have all of this together within yourself, heaven is going to mean that nirvana, that peace of mind. All it really means is a peace of mind. Heaven is a peace of mind. Now, we should, based off of His Majesty's instructions, as him being a head of state, we should be looking to create communities, get involved with politics, talk about, important issues, affect policy, in a way that helps communities, helps people, to solve problems, to solve wars, to get ourselves on a big level. The only way we're going to get on a big level is if we first start thinking big. So we first have to start setting objectives that are big, not petty issues. We first have to start thinking about big things that will, and getting involved with big issues that will impact in a positive way the globe. So what I believe what you're asking me is heaven on earth, as far as it being manifest on earth, as far as like a jurisdiction, as far as like a governance.
Yes.
Again, the steps to that, like I was explaining, is going to begin with a person's understanding, and then it's going to have to be like the steps that they're taking. So in order to guide people along those steps, advocate for real things. Set objectives for people that say Rastafari stands for this, and spend your time with advocating for real issues and talk about real things. Because every single time I see it without fail, every single time I share an article on politics, I know no one is going to give it any reaction. Now, I'm sure there's a few people who read it, but these I recognize have the least amount of reactions to it. Now, if we're going to learn about people, and if we're going to learn how to deal with people, we have to realize that we have to touch their emotions, right? So when we're talking about these topics, unfortunately, we have to realize that most people just don't pay them no mind. But these are the real topics, and we just have to put it in a way that touches people's hearts, which is why a lot of these media companies, people don't realize that the reason why they deal with all of the negativity and they say 50 people died over here and 30 people died over here is that they're trying to get viewers. They're touching your emotions. They're trying to get viewers and people interested, so they know that they have to use your emotions, right? But we can use their emotions in a positive way. I'm not saying it's easy, but we can use their emotions to work on, something meaningful, something that will help people's lives, because people are destroyed by these substances, these psychotropic substances, LSD, PSP, crystal meth, you name it. Whether it's on these conventions or not, people's lives are destroyed by them. Whether they buy it for $1 or whether they buy it for $5, it has a negative effect on the body, right? And when a mother sees their child on drugs, which is something that a lot of people go through, I've seen it firsthand, and a lot of people seen it firsthand. The effects of drugs are crippling, And we're talking about drugs that are not as harmful as those psychotropic substances that destroy lives. They destroy lives. So, I mean, I want to advocate for something real. And anytime that I feel like we're going in the wrong direction, I'm gonna be there, like it or not.
Let's close with the comment real quick, Omar, by Van Johnson. He says, I guess he was speaking to you. He says it's a Jesus Christus, not Jesus.
Who? Someone was speaking to me?
I guess so. When you were speaking, Van Johnson said Jesus Christos, not Jesus. I guess he's talking about the semantics between calling him, because there's no J, right?
Check it out, man. I'm not even trying to sound like I'm higher or better, but I can't spend my time with certain things, bro.
But it's a semantics argument, right? Because not everyone calls him Jesus and not everyone calls him Yesus. It's the same thing.
It's a title, bro.
It's a
title. It's not his name. His name is not Jesus Christ. His name is not Jesus Christ. It's because he didn't come 2,000 years ago.
Right.
So I mentioned that in 70 years, right? That these things are titles. What is his name? The Revelation 3:12 says he comes in a new name. That's what you're gonna have to concentrate on. What is his new name? Because his new name is actually his real name. So what's his name? I'm not gonna argue with people about whether we can say yeses or don't say Jesus. Nah.
Right.
Some things trivial, man. We have to get on something real right now. And I'm not trying to put no one down, but I mean, like, we have to, just like His Majesty said, we have to have a bigger perspective, bigger in outlook. So, I mean,
bigger in outlook, exactly.
You do the research you need to do, continue your work, and I hope that you will adapt a policy that will protect people from harmful substances, which falls in line with His Majesty's laws that punish the sale, distribution, manufacture, production of any of these substances, toxins, poisons that have dangerous effects on a human being.
Okay, Omar, I hope I can do that as well. So we'll leave on that note, and thank everyone for tuning in. It's almost 4 hours, so we'll just cut it now.